The story begins with a boy on the brink of death saying it was a wonderful dream and that he wanted to destroy it, devour it, and end it. The boy has a stake through his chest and says it's a shame if he hadn't done it. A blond man watches him and says that he's finally been eliminated, a pathetic end fitting for the most twisted of villains. This was the end of an episode, the fall of the world's strongest villain, that Nam Woo-hin was watching. His series is nearing its end, and he says the next chapter should wrap things up, thinking it's a miserable experience to write a novel he doesn't want to. The protagonist yawns and says whatever, that he'll finally be free of it after tomorrow and should leave his regrets behind. He hears someone knocking at the door and turns around asking who it is at this hour, saying it's too late to be knocking on others' doors. Nam goes to the door and asks who it is, but no one replies. He notices the sound has stopped and wonders if it was a drunk person, saying it's crazy and he needs rest, until a piece of paper falls. Woo asks where the paper came from. On the paper it says it's a gift and he can ask whenever he needs. He questions what kind of gift it is, until mana begins to spread, and the body of the villain from the episode he was just watching is summoned. Hin is shocked, and the villain smiles, saying this is how it will end. He spent so much time and effort, 10 years sharpening his blade for revenge on those who destroyed his family, friends, and love, losing so much and giving up even more, and still failed. But he's sure Nam knows this better than anyone. The protagonist starts to ask what he means by failed, but the villain interrupts, placing a hand on his head. A thick mist begins to move around his body, and the villain tells him to do it for himself. He'll be watching. Somewhere else, Nam appears lying in a bed in the villain's body. He wakes up, dazed, and asks if he passed out, then notices something strange and questions the clothes he's wearing. Woo walks to a mirror and wonders what's happening. He freezes in front of it, noticing ominously crimson hair and those sly mouths. The moment he sees those thin, half-lidded eyes hiding any trace of emotion, he realizes it. Apparently, he had possessed the body of Adel Arsene, the most powerful villain in his novel, just days before his elimination. A lineage of many demons, the Arsene family descends from the mixed plasma of demons. Thanks to that power, they were once one of the Empire's great families, but fell due to 6 specific families. Now the Arsene bloodline resides only in him, Adel Arsene. This is Adel's story and the reason he became a villain. He tried to get revenge but failed, and that's why he brought the creator himself here. In a few days, he'll lose his life to the knights of the 6 families. The protagonist opens the status window and thinks that in terms of talent, Adele is one of the most gifted in the novel, but can't compare to the talents he gave the main characters. No matter how appealing the villains are, he never intended for them to beat the main characters. To make matters worse, he currently can't control mana. And just imagining that the backstory he wrote to make Adele more intimidating is now coming to choke him until he notices something glowing and asks what it is. He thinks back and realizes he completely forgot about the paper that appeared before Adele threw him into the novel. Even if it's not of much help, he's in no position to be picky and remembers it said to ask if he needed anything. Woo notices something and picks up the paper, wondering why it's blank and where the text went, and if this is how he's going to die. On the paper, it calls him the creator and says that if he doesn't know how to use the gift, he should answer yes or no. Hin questions being called creator and insults it, saying he is Adele. The writing repeats that he should write yes or no. The protagonist asks if he's being ignored now and says, fine, he'll do it the way it wants. Then answers yes. The paper then writes how to use information purchase and will answer anything written on the paper. Some questions have a price, some don't. Nam wonders about this information purchase and whether it will really answer anything. The paper says the more important the question, the higher the price. Woo asks how to return to the real world. Adele replies in writing that it's impossible. Hugh thinks he was counting on that and says to tell him in detail how to use mana and how to use his traits, thinking he has to deal with this immediately. Arsene replies that this question doesn't require payment. Mana is emitted around his body, and the villain continues writing that the manipulation of mana and the methods to use the traits will be engraved into his body, asking if he accepts or not. The protagonist replies yes, and thinks he can feel the mana. The first trait, the ability to remove someone's 5 senses, darkness, is a success. Normally it would take much longer, but this will suffice. The next is the power to restrain opponents with his aura, eliminating intent. Another success. Trained knights or soldiers might withstand it, but should work on ordinary people. Now he just needs to understand Adele's stolen talent. Position swap. This is almost literally the power to switch places with an object of your choice. It's the best ability for assassination. Position swap 1 designate. Nam can only designate within about 16 square meters. Pathetic compared to Adele's power in the novel, but if he keeps training, he'll try it on that armor. He activates Position Swap 1 move and heads toward the armor but is thrown back. Woo grumbles, saying it's not like he expected much on the first try. Elsewhere, horses trot. Hin thinks he'll do this hundreds of times if necessary and will succeed and survive. In another place, knights on horseback say to hurry because they need to ensure he's eliminated this time. At the Arson family estate, someone approaches the subordinates. It's Captain Feltz, who asks where he is. The protagonist replies he's in that room. The men ask about his condition, saying he hasn't moved for days. The captain observes and enters quickly. Nam, sitting on a chair with a sword in hand, says he finally arrived and probably doesn't plan on leaving a young man alive, asking if that's right. Feltz says that's nonsense and to eliminate him. His men respond affirmatively. Wu activates Position Swap 1 Designate, immobilizing his opponent and making his sword vanish. Then Hin quickly attacks with his dagger. The captain sees his man fall and demands to know what the others are doing, ordering them to catch him. The protagonist jumps out the window. Just before hitting the ground, he activates Position Swap to lessen the fall, thinking he needs to reach the forest. Feltz says he's fleeing and orders them to pursue. In the forest, Nam is exhausted after running so much and thinks that even if he's lucky enough to lose the knights and escape the territory, there's no chance of surviving. Instead, he'll go through the portal in this forest and head straight to the demon realm. Currently, the demon realm has suffered great damage due to the war with humans, and if he shows enough talent, they might accept him. The problem is, until he hears something and wonders if they've already caught up. Wu hides immediately. The knights ride past and the captain says to spread out and find him. The issue is that he didn't describe exactly where the portal is, though he's sure it's nearby. He steps on a branch, shuts his eyes, and a massive explosion occurs. Feltz curses, calling him a bastard, saying so that's where he's hiding. Hin, kneeling on the ground, gets up and thinks he has one or two more swaps left and needs to run and find the portal, and maybe there's no choice, and tells the paper to give the exact location of the portal to the demon realm in Arson Forest. The answer? The information has a price. 100 gold coins or an artifact of relic, rank, or higher. The protagonist is irritated and asks how he's supposed to have something like that in this situation, until he's attacked and thrown back, crashing into a tree. The captain, holding his sword, asks if he ran because he wanted to live, saying he'll be eliminated today, whether he likes it or not. Nam, wounded, says not to make him laugh, he won't lose his life, and thinks he still has one last option. Whether he lives or dies, he has to try. He gets up with his dagger in hand. Feltz asks if he'll resist to the end, saying that he supposes Nam is still a patriarch. Hin, with trembling hands, asks why he's acting with such dignity when a group of grown men came to take down a single child, and asks how about changing professions to become a nanny, adding that maybe it'd be too hard alone anyway. Enraged, the captain's aura intensifies. He points his sword and says he'll eliminate him, but now he'll torture him with the sword gifted by Count Leon. Feltz approaches, telling him to be eliminated. The protagonist smiles, thinking it's now. A great light is emitted. Adele writes, thanking him for paying the price, noting that it's slightly more than what was needed, and begins guiding him to the portal to the demon realm, located in the forest. Nam starts to disappear. The captain looks on, confused. A bright light is emitted. Wu uses his ability and quickly escapes. Feltz yells for him to stop. As Hin runs, he thinks about that monstrous bastard, unable to believe he followed the path all the way here. The protagonist sees a portal and the captain grabs a piece of wood, saying he won't let him go. He throws the wood, about to strike him, but Nam uses his ability to stop it and says he'll see him next time. Feltz grits his teeth. Wu enters the portal. The captain mutters, thinking he went to the demon realm. Elsewhere, Hin is eating and wonders how much time has passed, thinking he woke up in a dungeon after going through the portal. A handmade dungeon. Someone created it. A place of secret demonic arts. He wonders why there's dried meat in a stone bed in a place like this, and if it was made by someone guarding a treasure. Not to mention, there's a blade-deflecting barrier and a stone guardian. He doesn't know which family made it, but it's filled with strange things, and that guardian is terrifying just to look at. And now it might be destroyed. The paper starts glowing and it says that this is the first time he'll receive a penalty, and that he cannot offer objects not in his possession as payment. Failing to comply will result in the information exchange not functioning. The protagonist thinks this guy is crazy, so he'll let it slide this time. Nam notices something and realizes that part of the wall looks strange. He touches it and feels he can sense things like Adele does. A voice says he doesn't have permission. Wu thinks it must be a function that disables the barrier. What a shame. And he needs to find another way out. He sees a stone that fell from the guardian. Well, if it's a stone, maybe it'll work. He uses his ability. A light begins to move, summoning a huge monster. Hin hasn't noticed its presence yet, and when he does, he's startled. Elsewhere, a bucket falls to the ground and someone calls another person an idiot, asking how they dropped it. Someone watches them from above. It's Crete, who says things are definitely getting busy. Maybe it's because his daughter is about to attempt a raid on the intermediate secret domain soon, and that's complicated. He thinks if she succeeds, she'll gain the right to enter Saitan. But even if he orders her to fail, she'll definitely go against it. That's because only by entering Satan can she get revenge on the humans who killed her mother. He calls her a brat and wonders if she'll survive in a place where only demonic bastards gather. The maid approaches and says there's a problem. The patriarch asks what's with the commotion. The subordinate apologizes and says there's news of something unidentified in the secret domain. Crete asks if she means the secret domain. She confirms and says there are no signs of the door being open to enter, so everyone is confused. The demon asks if the intruder's identity has been revealed. The maid responds that he activated a function that can only be used from the inside, but they don't know who he is. The patriarch thinks maybe he was forcefully summoned through the portal made during the demon-human war and says he'll lose his life anyway, so there's no need to worry. They should focus on preparing his daughter's exam. The subordinate says she understands and thinks that if things go well, they might gain a good pawn, assuming they don't lose him in the secret domain, of course. Elsewhere, the protagonist is thrown to another place and asks if it's a wolf, saying he was nearly done for. Even if the barrier disappears, he'll be in trouble if he goes out and wonders if it's also made of stone. He thinks it's worth a try. Nam uses his ability and realizes it worked. The wolf is paralyzed while he escapes. Then, the beast, confused, tries to destroy the barrier to get him. Wu says it's going to lose its life doing that. Now, he just needs to find the exit. Or maybe not. Hin comes face to face with a giant beast and says so there's a mission in each stage, and this one seems more dangerous than the wolf. He traps this beast too and thinks that, as expected, they're inanimate. And it's possible, as long as he swaps to an area with a trap. The protagonist keeps running. A voice says it welcomes him for reaching the end. Nam asks if it welcomes an intruder, saying it seems like the boss room, and wonders if someone is there, until he finds an end knight and thinks that based on strength it seems similar to Felt's. The boss expresses his respect for making it that far. Wu uses his ability, trapping him too, and walks to the side asking if that thing over there is a treasure chest. He thinks it's bigger than expected and also has an engraving of a black dragon, realizing it's a black dragon ornament, and wonders where he's seen it before. He recalls that among the greatest demon families are sloth, lust, gluttony, wrath, envy, and greed. As evil and proud as a black dragon, bears the seventh deadly sin, pride. Hin grumbles, thinking that if that guy catches him, he'll surely die. And since it's come to this, he'll grab the chest and run. There has to be something useful inside to escape from this place. Suddenly, a terrible mana stirs, and a slime heads straight for his face, forcing its way into his mouth. The protagonist starts coughing and screaming in desperation, until plasma is spat out. Later, in the same place, a sphere lies on the ground surrounded by plasma. Nam wonders how much time has passed and whether his left eye popped out. Reflected in his dagger, he sees and asks if it's a black eye, wondering if that black liquid jumped into him. Wu checks the system and realizes it's the Eye of Pride. He smiles, thinking that with it, he'll never lose to groups weaker than himself. Not bad at all. He made the right choice coming to the demon realm, got everything he needed, and now it's time to get out. He had been focused on the chest but now notices there's a door in front of him and wonders what to do. He says he's caused a commotion, so there'll be a bunch of troops waiting outside. He'll be eliminated if he walks out. He wonders if kneeling faster than the speed of light could save him. Hin thinks that if they find out he's from the arson family, they'll eliminate him whether he begs or not, so he needs to hide that insignia. The boss, surrounded by a massive aura, shouts for the door to be opened now. The protagonist doesn't quite get it, and the boss says Her Highness is coming, and to hurry up and open that damn thing. Nam is confused and wonders who this highness is. He starts to suspect the reason for the dried meat and stone beds is tied to her, and that this is a domain created by the great families for testing. He needs to figure out who owns this place, and he stole their reward, so they'll chop him up on the spot. He asks the paper who the closest character to him is. It replies that the information has a price. He must pay either something worth 100 gold coins or an artifact of relic rank or higher. Wu wonders if he should pay and how. He writes that he'll pay with 100 of his max mana. He thinks it's tough, but if he survives, he can recover. The payment is accepted and will take 100 of the creator's mana. The closest figure is Reen, the youngest daughter of Crete Bears, patriarch of the Bears family. Hin thinks his life is over. This domain was created by Baris to train his youngest daughter, and the Eye of Pride is likely her reward for completing it. Reen, who has enough authority in the Baras family, is coming, slicing guardians like butter and showing off in front of him. The girl decapitates the final boss with one strike. The protagonist watches and thinks he has to act. He stares at her and Reen asks who he is. Nam kneels and congratulates her on completing the domain, saying she's finally proven worthy. The girl points her sword at him and tells him to explain. Wu says the patriarch ordered him to act as her guard, thinking their eyes met, but she didn't recognize the Eye of Pride. Reen asks if it's him. Hin replies yes, and despite his appearance, he's quite skilled. He thinks he'll use her to get out of there and wonders if she trusts him. He grabs her sword and approaches her, touching her arm and asking what she thinks, saying it would be useful for her protection. The girl pushes his hand away and the protagonist wonders if she's angry, but thanks God she let it slide. He tells her they should leave now and that she should head straight to the patriarch who's waiting. He'll cover her path while handling the other tasks the patriarch entrusted him with, thinking he has to get out of there fast. He opens the door, saying he guarantees he wasn't late. Reen begins trembling upon seeing her father. Crete smiles. Nam closes his eyes, confused, wondering why he's there. He thinks the patriarch will try to eliminate him if he realizes he took the Eye of Pride and wonders why he isn't reacting. The demon asks if she completed the domain successfully. His daughter answers yes, and the patriarch tells them to follow. Hin wonders what he's planning. They walk while the protagonist thinks it's impossible to take them all on and that he has nothing to offer the paper, which means he can't use its power. So this is the bear's mansion. Eventually, they arrive in a room, and Crete tells them to return to their posts and for him to wait there, as he will call him later. Nam wonders if he's really going to leave him alone and if this is his chance, but then thinks, of course not. Later, still in the same place, his daughter stands before her father, and the demon says she has completed her final task and asks if she wants to enter the academy. Reen replies yes. Her father looks at her and asks what she thought of him. The girl recalls the moment he used his ability and says he is strong. The patriarch says he understands and thinks it's intriguing, then tells her that since she has proven herself worthy, she may go to Saitan as she wishes. Reen becomes excited and thanks him. Crete thinks he expected him to lose his life immediately after appearing in the domain and wonders if he survived and even took the Eye of Pride. And now he also has his daughter's favorable opinion. Definitely worth using. The protagonist outside the room wonders how long he'll have to keep standing there. In the hallway, a subordinate guides him and tells his master that he brought him. Nam enters. The demon stares at him and Wu wonders what's going through his mind, asking why he let him live. The patriarch starts releasing a massive amount of mana and calls him a bastard, saying he tricked his daughter well. Hin is hit and falls to the ground, asking if he plans to eliminate him. Crete smiles and stops releasing mana. The protagonist, trembling on the floor, thinks it's an incredible demonic energy. The demon says he's clever and asks his name. Nam replies that he's Adele. The patriarch resumes releasing his energy, making him float and moving him all around with pure power. Wu asks what he wants from him. Crete tells him to open his mouth. Hin doesn't understand, and the demon says he just needs him to keep up the story he told his daughter, and if he has any other intention, the poison will tear his heart apart. He'll arrange a place for him to stay, so he must wait until he's called and can leave now. The protagonist grumbles in his thoughts. Later, elsewhere, the subordinate says he'll be staying there. Nam thinks he became a guest in this house because of the patriarch's will. The subordinate wishes him a good rest. Wu keeps thinking he's already grateful enough to have been spared, but it feels like he's been completely used. He was partially acknowledged by Crete, so this must be a good situation. He thinks he needs to get rid of that thing. It has to work. He uses his ability and removes the poison inside him, realizing it worked. As he thought, it's inanimate. He doesn't even want to think about what would have happened if it failed, and guesses Crete would notice immediately if he eliminated it. So now he wonders what to do. The creature wakes up, and Hin figures it's because the mana supply it was absorbing from his body was cut off. So the protagonist releases mana and tells it to eat that. The creature eats, and Nam says there's no other way to satisfy it than this, and tells it to move along and go back to sleep. He lies down on the bed, saying he can finally relax, and wonders how much of the trap in his throat he managed to remove. Feels like he's about to pass out. Wu opens the status window, checking his stats, and realizes he still needs to evaluate things. Position swap went up to level 2, but the amount of mana is the problem. Compared to the protagonist, it's just a drop in the ocean. He wonders how he can increase his mana and thinks that it is what it is, but then realizes he may have another way. Later, somewhere else, Reen says she doesn't like it. Hin doesn't understand. It's already been 3 days since he was assigned as her guard, and she always reacts coldly. She used to have a bright personality when she was younger, but after losing her mother to humans, she changed. As the author, he feels bad. A subordinate calls out to both of them and says the master is summoning them. The protagonist thinks the reason he called must be related to his daughter's admission to Saitan. She'd been waiting for this, after succeeding in conquering the secret territory, yet her father still didn't give permission. Crete says that Saitan is not an easy place, and with her abilities, she would lose her life shortly after arriving, failing to take revenge for her mother. Nam feels like he shouldn't be there. The patriarch says that if she takes Adele as her guard, he'll permit her entry. Reen immediately replies that she doesn't want to. Wu wonders if she hates him that much. Saitan is the academy of the demon realm, where all the kingdom's promising children gather. and they're in constant conflict with the Imperial Academy, where the main characters gather. In this setting, several students, including her, lost their lives. It's the worst place to go, where death is only a matter of time. Hin thinks he doesn't understand why she wants to go to a place like that. If it were him, maybe it's the best place to gather strength. He knows all the major incidents that occur between Satan and the Imperial Academy, and decides to give it a try, saying he has a request regarding that. The demon waits for the request, and the protagonist thinks that if he's going to be dragged into this anyway, he might as well get the most out of it and says he'd like something related to mana. Crete says he thought he'd ask for the removal of that. Nam starts to get nervous, thinking Crete hasn't realized that the poisonous worm is no longer inside him. The patriarch calls him an arrogant bastard and says it's not a difficult request, so he'll grant it, and tells his daughter she may leave. She replies yes, and leaves. Wu wonders if she really hates the idea of going with him that much, and what he's going to give. Maybe a mana elixir? He thinks an artifact wouldn't be bad either. The demon says that since it's a family treasure, her people might react sensitively, which is why he sent her out. Hin wonders about a family treasure. Crete begins releasing mana and says he knows the mana he has is too little, and that he would be eliminated in his daughter's place, so this is the best he can do for him. He tells him to come closer, for he will transfer the Barres family's mana cultivation technique to him. The protagonist wonders about the mana cultivation technique. The patriarch extends his hand, releasing mana, and says, "May the demon god grant the servant clarity amidst the flow of chaos, bestow the rightful challenges, and may the thousands of demons not starve, but do not put them to the test. Glorified be his name." Nam receives the mana. Crete says that a normal person would have lost their sanity just from hearing that chant, but he's definitely interesting. With this cultivation technique, mana will be granted to him directly by the demon god, so he'll get what he desires. Wu wonders about this demon god. The patriarch says it seems his family has some connection to the seven sins. However, the day he planted the venomous worm in him, didn't matter whether he was a spy or not. Hin wonders if the arson family is connected to the seven deadly sins and thinks he doesn't remember ever writing that. The demon tells him he may go now. Later, in a forest, the protagonist sits on a rock and decides to practice there, since his mana might go out of control. He begins cultivating, thinking that once he accepts the demonic energy of the demon god, he won't be able to use human mana anymore, but has no other choice. Suddenly, a creature with immense energy calls him a mutt. Nam looks on, confused, and the creature says he doesn't think he carries that child's plasma, and instead, it seems like he carries the plasma of that filthy traitor. Hin asks if he is the demon god. The creature replies yes, and says the world seems to call him the proud god. The protagonist asks if he was planning to eliminate him. The demon god replies that if he were, he would have done it the moment he spoke, but for some reason, he doesn't want to. He seems to have been burned by the same sin as him, and feels a strange sense of familiarity with him, so he'll grant him a mark, one who walks the same path as himself. This mark means he'll be able to wield that power, and he calls him an arrogant traitor, telling him not to lose his composure to pride. Nam thinks he's obtained the power of a demon, and believes the mark gives him 3 extra lives. The mark is a tattoo, and soon his body will be covered in them. He senses something and looks back, coming face to face with his master's daughter, and wonders why she's there, and if she heard him. Reen asks if he is a dark priest. Hin doesn't understand. Later, elsewhere, it's been a month since he received the demon god's mark. He's trained a lot, but to think his mana would increase 4-fold in such a short time, it's probably thanks to his traits, interest, and focus. In a few years, he could surpass the heirs of the 6 human houses, and in his current state, he could conquer that secret domain. But before that, he wonders why the girl is standing in front of his house instead of at the training field. He greets her. Reen looks at him, and the protagonist thinks it's good that she's no longer avoiding him like before. But considering she completely misunderstood and thinks he's a priest, he supposes it makes sense, since only dark priests can communicate with the demon god in this world. Honestly, it's better she didn't hear what he talked about with the demon god. If she treats him like a superior, terrible rumors will spread through the family. He calls her and says he understands what she was thinking, but asks that she treat him the same way she used to. The girl gets flustered, and Nam says he's only following the family head's orders to protect her, so she can speak comfortably. Reen stares at him and tells him to bring some water. Wu doesn't understand, and the girl says he told her to treat him comfortably, and she's tired and thirsty after training. Hin thinks, as expected from the Pride family, she changed her attitude quickly. The girl tells him to hurry. He replies yes, and figures he'll have to do whatever she asks. Later, still in the forest, Reen drinks the water. The protagonist thinks he has to act quickly and conquer that domain already, but she's not leaving him alone, and he barely has time to act before the main character crosses into the demon realm. He needs that treasure to survive in Saitan. He calls her and asks how her preparations for entering Saitan are going. She asks why he's bringing that up out of nowhere. Nam replies that it's because she'll meet all sorts of wicked people there, and he's asking because he's worried about her. The girl says she got everything she needs. Hin asks if she's sure and why not double check just to be safe, saying he doesn't want her to get into trouble for forgetting something important. Reen asks what he's trying to say and tells him to get to the point. He says he's only saying this because he's worried about her. After all, he's the one escorting her. The girl calls him a liar and asks what he's trying to do behind her back. The protagonist realizes she didn't fall for it. Reen asks if he's tired of her. Nam says that actually, he heard there's a domain near this area, so he was planning to conquer it and that it's for her safety. The girl stays silent thinking and then says she just remembered something she forgot. Wu tells her to go back then. Reen says it's warming up. Hin doesn't understand and asks what she means. She draws her sword and says she hasn't warmed up yet, so she'll go to the domain with him, and they can finish it today, since it's nearby. She tells him to hurry and asks where the domain is. He says it's the domain of the Eternals. That place was once ruled by necromancers, but now it's filled with enraged soldiers since the necromancers were wiped out after the Demon-Human War. Reen says she's heard of that place and knows about it. The protagonist thinks that's enough to make her uneasy and figures it's at least a high-level domain. But now, the number of soldiers has probably increased. Either way, having her help won't be bad. The problem is, walking around with her makes it harder to escape the mansion. News will reach her father immediately. He asks what she thinks about not going if it'll be a burden, saying if her father finds out she left without permission. The girl interrupts, saying it's fine. She knows a secret way out. They walk and she says it's right there. Nam says she seems familiar with this place and thinks she must sneak out through here often. Reen says they need to hurry before they're caught. Outside the mansion, they approach several mountains, and Wu asks how much farther they need to go, saying he doesn't usually leave the facilities, so he doesn't know the area well. They both comment they're almost there. They keep walking, kick a rock, and Hin says it looks like they've arrived. The place is completely empty and dirty. The girl says, "What a damn son of a Cerberus." The protagonist thinks that sounds like a curse, and that he must hide his arson lineage at all costs. Only he knows the path to the domain and says he thinks they can find it by digging around there. Beneath the largest stone statue, soldiers with rotting flesh guard the land. Nam says this must be the entrance, and asks if she can let him go ahead. The girl says no, she'll go first. They enter and there are torches lighting the area. Wu thinks it's brighter inside than he expected. Reen says it's right over there, and they came to the right place. They observe the dark, empty place. Hin thinks this is on a different level from the Bare's domain and bets there are at least 100 new tombs here. The girl says they should go. Then, a hand emerges from the ground and several skeletons begin to rise, surrounding them. The protagonist says he's leaving his back to her. Reen says the same. Mana starts swirling around her body. She destroys multiple skeletons with just one strike. Nam thinks he made the right decision bringing her and says there must be a necromancer summoner near the end of the group. The girl says she understands, and Wu, fighting the skeletons, says he'll catch up to her. The bone fragments begin to assemble. The defeated skeletons start reviving again. Reen asks if they came back to life. A terrifying skull says she should not fear anything that comes from here and to eliminate all intruders. The girl says they keep reviving and asks what they should do. Hin replies that it's because of the summoner and tells her not to stop, just keep moving forward. He runs toward his enemies and eliminates them, saying there's an easy way to end this. Reen says she gets it. She charges at the summoner, and the necromancer, radiating great energy, shouts for them to stop. The protagonist says they need to take him down and thinks everything ends once they break the summoner's orb. He's finally going to unlock the new level 2 position swap skill. The skeletons grow larger and stronger, and Nam thinks this won't be easy. He calls for her. The girl, using her incredible strength, defeats them again, smashing them to pieces. Wu unlocks his position swap 2 skill. He charges at his enemy and realizes the new version allows him to swap objects with each other. Hin uses his skill, the enemy's weapon vanishes and appears in his hand. The necromancer screams, "No!" Nam shatters the summoning circle, defeating all enemies. The summoner asks how this is possible. Wu says they did it. She agrees. The necromancer thanks him. Hin thinks the whole strategy happened thanks to what he wrote and tells them to rest in peace. Reen calls him and asks if there's anything else left there. He replies yes, it's time for the reward, and thinks he'll finally get the item he needs. The rewards are Fangs of Darkness, a dagger made from black steel of the demon realm that converts mana darkness and increases sharpness and speed in darkness, and Eternal Full Moon, an artifact ring that absorbs mana and moonlight. The protagonist picks up the dagger and thinks that with it, he can fully use the darkness trait. He wonders what the ring is and thinks it's nice to have, but he doesn't need it and asks what she thinks about keeping the ring while he keeps the dagger. The girl says that's fine. Nam takes her hand and asks if she allows it. He slips the ring onto her finger. Reen blushes. Wu doesn't understand and wonders why she's acting like that. questioning if rings have special meaning among demons too. He asks what she thinks. The girl, still flustered, looks at the ring on her finger and replies that it's amazing. Hin says he's glad she likes it, and now that they've dealt with the boss, all that's left is to collect the gold. A sword is placed on his shoulder. The protagonist, a little awkward, says he'll divide it evenly. Every last coin. After completing the domain, they return to the mansion. Nam spent his time either walking with her or training his mana, and a month passed that way. He made satisfying progress, almost 1,300 mana, which is about half of the Demon Realm's ranking system. A few days later, the master summoned both of them to say it was time to go to Saitan. Wu thinks the time has finally come. Crete says today is the entrance exam for the academy and asks if they're ready. They both respond yes, and the patriarch tells them they can go, saying he doesn't believe a farewell is necessary. Reen remains silent, bows her head, and leaves. Hin says he'll accompany the young lady. The demon calls to him and says he hopes he does well. The protagonist replies yes. Meanwhile, the carriage is waiting outside and they have to leave immediately. Crete watches them from the window. Nam thinks he said he wouldn't say goodbye, but maybe even demons feel the same way humans do about their children, and that he's worried about her future. But now that things have come to this, he'll reach his goal in Saitan. The carriage moves. Wu is nervous, looking at the girl, and thinks she hasn't said a word since they left, wondering if he did something wrong. Reen stares at him and thinks she didn't like him at first because he seems suspicious, but he's better than she expected. Hin tries to start a conversation and says the weather's nice today. The girl thinks his words and actions are so lighthearted, and he doesn't seem powerful at all, and wonders if he's really a priest. The protagonist wonders why she's staring at him like that. Reen thinks he's an idiot. She even saw him talking to the demon god, and wonders why she's doubting him. Nam wonders if he messed something up. The girl stays silent and thoughtful. An eternal vow. That's what it means in the demon realm when someone of the opposite gender places a ring on your finger. And he did it without saying anything. She wonders what kind of vow he made and thinks she's curious. Wu calls her and says they'll arrive in about an hour, earlier than expected. Reen looks at him and says it's fine. Hin asks if he did something wrong. She tells him to be quiet, she's going to take a nap. They eventually arrive and unload the luggage from the carriage. The protagonist looks around and says, this is the capital of the demon realm. Even though it doesn't look much different from the human realm, it has a very medieval feel, though some differences include people having horns and other physical traits. Elite demons have a clear difference, tattoos, and that guy over there has one on his neck just like him. The girl asks what he's waiting for and tells him to hurry up. He says it's fine and asks where they're going. Reen replies that the entrance exam is at noon in 2 days. They need to register before that. Nam says if it's in 2 days, what does she think about touring the capital until then? She replies she's not in the mood. They walk in silence. Wu tries to say something, but she cuts him off and says there's no time. They need to register. Hin wonders if it wasn't written in the story that she hadn't left home since her mother's death, and thinks he just can't understand her. So this is Saitan, and it's amazing. It's 3 times the size of a normal university. The receptionist says that guy is already registered and to come back in 2 days, calling the next in line. And it's the protagonist saying they're there to register for the exam. The receptionist asks what he is. He doesn't look like a demon. The old man, furious, asks if a half-breed dares to apply for admission, saying that even if they lost the war, what kind of place does he think this is? Nam thinks he sees a depressing future ahead. The receptionist says it's because of rats like him, until someone interrupts and asks what's going on. It's Reen. The old man looks impressed by her horns and says that engraving is quite fascinating, thinking he didn't expect to see a child from one of the capital sin houses. And if she's applying, she can state her house and identity. The girl gives her info and says that this is her guard who will be entering with her. The receptionist asks about a half-breed as a bodyguard and says the capital houses have really lowered their standards. To be admitted to Saitan? Reen says that's enough. She won't stand by and let him insult the bear's house. The old man says they don't discriminate against applicants based on identity, so forget what he said, and to please state their name and house. Wu gives his info. The receptionist says their registration is complete and to show up on the day of the entrance exam. Hin thinks that during the demon-human war, half-demons were stronger and fought alongside humans, so it's natural they're hostile toward them. It's irritating, but nothing can be done. He says now they need accommodations and that place looks good enough. The girl says the inns here are very old. He replies there's nothing to be done, he has no money, and thinks the 10 gold her father gave them will barely be enough for the 2 of them to live for a month. Because of the war's aftermath, the bear's house became poor, so he couldn't ask for more. He tells her to go inside. They enter, and someone welcomes them. The protagonist asks if they have rooms for 2 people for 2 days. The clerk says yes and offers one, then asks if he'll be staying in the same room as the young lady behind him. Nam replies no, give them separate rooms. The clerk says that's fine. 2 rooms for 2 days, including meals. That'll be 2 gold. The rooms are on the 2nd floor. Wu thinks that's about 200,000 won in human currency, not bad. Reen says she'll head up first. Hin says he'll bring the luggage soon and tells her to have a good rest. The girl thanks him and says he should too. The protagonist thinks she's always lived in a huge mansion, so this must be her first time sleeping somewhere like this. Well, she'll get used to it quickly. Now it's time to rest for the next 2 days. Elsewhere, guards tell the applicants to enter and follow instructions. Nam thinks there are so many people, must be at least 100, and to think so many are willing to fight against humans. He needs to be careful not to expose his identity. A voice says that from this point on, keep your IDs in hand and board in order. Wu asks, board what? A train approaches, and he thinks he wasn't expecting this. They say multiple maze-like dimensional portals were set up to block intruders. Only through this train can one enter Saitan. To think that massive fortress they saw outside was just part of this place. He wonders how big this really is. They board the train, and a voice says they'll arrive in Saitan shortly and to prepare for impact. They disembark. Wu looks around and says they've finally arrived. The train stops and they get off. The voice tells the applicants to follow the guides and enter the auditorium where the exam will take place. Many people walk forward and enter the auditorium. Hin thinks it's huge and feels so oppressive. Most are young demons, and he wonders if any other heirs of the capital sin houses are present. He looks to the side and notices that those people aren't students. Judging by their clothing, they seem to be instructors. If he leaves a good impression on them, maybe life will be easier. Reen says time's up. A door closes and everything goes dark. The protagonist thinks it was broad daylight just now and wonders if this is some kind of magical effect and what kind of exam this will be. A voice tells them to be quiet. Someone is watching them. A woman speaks, welcoming them to Saitan, and calls them a bunch of brainless, pathetic idiots, saying she'll see plenty of them trying to lose their lives this year. Nam thinks he can't believe just her voice alone carries so much pressure. The woman says to stop the chit-chat and that the entrance exam will begin immediately. The pressure intensifies. Wu calls out to the young lady and she tells him to focus on the exam. People around them start kneeling, overwhelmed by pain. The instructors observe, and one instructor says the director has a twisted taste and asks if the other agrees. Her teammate replies that no matter how talented someone is, if their mental strength is weak, they're useless. There's a reason Director Lu Jian personally oversees the first stage of the entrance exam, called the mental endurance test. It's to see if applicants can endure interrogation and keep secrets if captured by humans. The instructor says it's been about 5 minutes, and hardly anyone is still standing. That should be enough for now. The female instructor notes that only 8 are still on their feet. All the others collapsed. She had high hopes due to the large number of applicants. The instructor says approximately 40% lasted more than 5 minutes, which is enough compared to the last batch. The instructor says that's a relief, and they say this group includes all the heirs of the 7 capital sin houses. Looks like the rumors were true. The instructor says now that she mentioned it, that makes sense. And wait, who is that kid? He doesn't look like one of the heirs. The female instructor agrees and says even so, he stayed sane for almost 10 minutes. But he won't last much longer. The instructor watches, thinking something seems off. The protagonist releases a massive amount of mana. The instructors look on in surprise. The director becomes alert as well. The instructor thinks this is dangerous. They need to eliminate him. He doesn't seem special, but suddenly the atmosphere around him changed, like someone casually picking flowers or squashing insects. An emotionless killing intent. Not the primal type from beasts, but the kind possessed by the most dangerous killers. Suddenly, all the instructor's attention turns to him, and his body moves before he even realizes it. The director watches while still radiating pressure. The instructor grows uneasy, wondering if he can't even dominate a mere rookie. The female instructor smiles. People continue collapsing. Nam thinks he's about to pass out and needs to find a way to endure. And wait, maybe with his killing intent, he can oppose that girl's aura. He has no other choice. He begins releasing a massive energy around him. Lu Jian says he's holding up quite well and wonders if she should increase the intensity a bit. Wu thinks, just a little more. The director increases the intensity, but he still stands firm. She watches closely. Hin breathes heavily and says it really worked. He's feeling much better. He wonders how the young lady is doing. He looks over and sees she's holding up just fine as expected, and the heirs of the 7 capital sin houses are doing well too. The heir of envy, Balton. The heir of lust, Prone. The heir of gluttony, Samuel. The heir of sloth, Aaron. And the heir of greed, Guar. Some of these characters were written with genuine affection, but all of them are destined to fall for the main characters group. 6 of them, including Reen. The protagonist notices something: long white hair, red eyes, and a crown of thorns. There's no doubt it's the person who will become the greatest villain of the demon realm in the future. The demon lord, the heir of wrath, Diana. A voice says, that's enough, marking the end of the first exam. Nam thinks that traditionally the Demon King comes from the Wrath family, so there's no reason for her to be here. The successor to the Demon Lord came to Seitan as an applicant. Did something happen that he didn't know about? Someone asks if they failed and says, no way, asking what kind of exam this even is. They say not to touch them and ask if they even know who their father is, demanding to speak to the director. The instructor says he couldn't care less who his father is, asks if he's capiche, and tells him not to make him repeat it. Those who didn't last 5 minutes during the first test aren't needed here. Those who failed are dismissed. Close the gates. Hin thinks Seitan is truly ruthless, and luckily he passed. Now that he thinks about it, that girl is Seitan's director. He knew he'd seen her somewhere before. She's one of the strongest beings in the demon realm, despite her cute appearance. He was lucky to pass the first test, but he has to be more careful. He could fail at any time, since only a few will pass the second test. Then he hears someone say, "That's amazing. She must be Reen," and ask if that's the combat genius of the Bears family. The protagonist thinks that Reen seems quite popular and figures it makes sense since she's the heir to one of the 7 deadly sins. And they seem to endure the oppressive, eliminative judgment of the director. He wonders why no one is paying attention to him. Reen approaches and says he passed too. He replies that he did and somehow made it, thinking he should be satisfied that he left the impression of not being a typical applicant and is sure the instructors and the director will remember him. The instructor asks for their attention and says he will introduce himself. He is Aries, the one in charge of teaching them. Nam says he looks like someone who drinks plasma with his coffee instead of sugar. The instructor congratulates them for passing the first test through mental strength. It was a test to see if they could maintain their sanity under a potential future human interrogation involving torture. Also, the 8 applicants who endured until the end will get extra points. And if they do well on the second exam, they may gain access to the armory. Wu thinks he's lucky. Thanks to the devil, he decided to stay until the end, and can even feel everyone's envy. Aries says he will now explain the second test. In the second exam, they will display their abilities, specifically the talents and weapons they possess to be used against humans. Their class assignment will depend on this exam, so they should keep that in mind. Hin thinks he must mean they'll be assigned to appropriate classes based on their weapons and talents, whatever, and wonders what kind of humans they'll be facing. The instructor says the assignment for the second exam, as well as the human they'll face, will now be shown. He moves his hand, emitting a massive light, and summons someone with a huge sword. Everyone stares in shock, and the protagonist wonders if that's not the strongest hero among the heads of the 6 great families, Ninai Cell. The hero has a terrifying aura, and Nam wonders why that human is here, thinking it's totally random. Reen asks if he knows who that person is. He replies of course he does. It's Ninai Cell, head of House Ninai. He has a close relationship with the main character of the story, and not only that, his lineage is determined by birth, and this is the protagonist's father, the Sword Saint, who built the most powerful house with talent alone. The boys say it's the Sword Saint, and that if he wants to kill them, he can just say so. Wu thinks others must know him too, which makes sense, since he defeated a considerable number of demon houses. The instructor says that naturally they expect all of them to endure the full force of the Sword Saint, but he'll only use 10% of his total power. If he used it all, they'd stand no chance. Reen asks if 10% isn't too easy. Hin replies, not really. Even weakened, a monster is still a monster. He thinks that even the 10th Sword Saint could easily destroy an entire city and wonders how they're supposed to pass such a brutal test. There must be a minimum standard for approval. He wishes he could see the information scroll, but he has no money, and the number of questions is limited too. Aries says that with their current abilities, they won't be able to defeat him alone, so they'll be divided into quartets to keep things fair. The 8 top performers from the first test will be placed in different groups, and the rest will be assigned randomly. The protagonist thinks the 8 top scorers must include the heirs of the 7 sins and himself. He was carried, but he's still in the top 8. He notices how the boys look at his partner, then at him, and thinks again about those stares. By now he's used to them. They're probably thinking, lucky bastard, hit the jackpot, and we're screwed. Someone taps him. It's Reen, telling him to come back safely. Nam says, of course, and wishes her success too. The instructor says he'll call names, starting with Group 1, and later, still in the same place, Group 33 is Adele as leader, and team members Kina, Chris, and Sanchez. Wu thinks he doesn't recognize those names and wonders if they're background characters with no relevance in the original story. He looks at his group and introduces himself. His name is Adele, and it's a pleasure to meet them. The boy says his name is Chris. The girl next to him is Kina, and the guy in the corner is Sanchez. The rebellious boy turns and asks if a half-blood is the team leader, saying it's a disgrace to his house. Hin thinks that now even some nobody is looking down on him and a disgrace to his house. My ass. He wonders if the guy thinks he's one of the Sin heirs and says, anyway, let's all do our best. Chris and Kina agree and say they'll give their best. The protagonist says that first, they need to decide their positions and explain what kind of weapons and abilities they have, and they'll start with Chris. He replies that his ability is mana transformation. He can create this prism and turn it into armor or a sword. It's not very powerful but versatile. Nam says he understands and thinks it's not bad at all. He passes and says the next is Kina. She says she's not the fighting type. She's support. Wu asks if it's like a buff. Kina says that's right, and she prays to her demons to enhance her allies' speed. She releases an incredible energy and then feels tired, asking what he thinks and if he's feeling lighter. Hin replies that he thinks so. Kina says he's so stingy. The protagonist says he was joking and not to get upset and thinks it's better than nothing, but it's so weak he barely feels any difference. Honestly, he has no idea how she passed the first test. And now, lastly, is Sanchez. He says his ability is this. Sanchez changes his appearance. Nam thinks it's a hardening type ability, perfect for a tank. Sanchez says now it's his turn. A piece of metal falls to the ground and Wu quickly moves toward him. Sanchez doesn't understand and Hin says it's teleportation. That's his ability. Kina is impressed and says it's amazing. Chris says that ability is really good. The protagonist thanks them for the compliments and thinks that still, who knows what variables may arise, so he won't reveal all the details of his ability yet. He says their formation is simple. Chris and Sanchez, who have good defense, will go in front, he'll stay in the center, and Kina will provide support from the rear and asks if everyone agrees. Kina says it sounds good. The instructor says they'll begin the second test now and for the groups to be ready. Nam says it's finally starting. The instructor tells Group 1 to step forward. Wu thinks that even facing the Sword Saint, they're full of spirit. Ninai moves his sword and strikes, knocking them all down with a single blow. Everyone looks shocked, and a boy on the ground starts screaming. Hin thinks he couldn't even see him move and wonders if that's really just a tenth of his power. Ares calls for Group 2, and they're also eliminated instantly. Then Group 3, then Group 4. A boy says there's no way. They'll lose no matter what, so the test makes no sense. The instructor stares at him and says they can skip the test, asking if the remaining two still want to continue. They say yes, they'll try. The protagonist wonders if they're really doing it and thinks he understands. The qualification to pass the second test must be... Chris asks if they don't need to do the test. Nam replies of course not. Ares says for Group 4 to begin. Wu thinks they can't fight Cell with just 2 people, but he'll watch a bit more. The Sword Saint throws them far away with a single strike and they scream in pain. Hin thinks if he used his true aura, those two would be minced meat now. Chris asks if they can really defeat that monster. Sanchez asks if he's scared of a human mistake. The protagonist thinks he can hear his legs shaking from here. Group 5 is also easily defeated. So is Group 9. Group 10 gives up. So does Group 20. Then it's Group 30. Nam thinks that by the time Group 30 is called, 5 teams had already given up, and no group had managed to land a significant hit on the Sword Saint, a battle against an impossible opponent, and there are no restrictions on withdrawing mid-fight either. Then, during a fight, a boy blocks the Sword Saint's attack. Chris is surprised he blocked it, and Wu thinks the further back the groups are, the longer the battles last. Their skills are starting to improve compared to the earlier applicants. He understands. This is the real condition to pass the second test. Sanchez says it's almost their turn. Chris says he's shaking all over. Hin says he figured out how to pass the second test. Sanchez asks what he means. The protagonist replies that the criterion is the same. Even if you're beaten down by an oppressive force, you have to get back up until the fight ends. Seeing how the instructors deal with those who quit and how strong the Sword Saint is, he's certain that's it. And why not? He's cut off as Ares calls the next group, 33. Nam wonders if they should try to defeat the Sword Saint and says that, with their powers, they can do it. They say to go for it, it doesn't matter if they lose. Wu wonders what does it matter if he's a half-demon or not, because with Adele's talent, the strongest villain, they can win. They walk forward, getting into attack positions. Hin thinks that unlike the main character, he doesn't have much information about Cell, he wasn't detailed, and wonders what he should do there. He tells his group not to get nervous and to stay in formation. They reply that they understand, and Sanchez says at least he knows that much. The Sword Saint begins to release his energy and the protagonist says he's coming. Ninai attacks, breaking Chris's barrier with a single blow and sending him flying. Nam tells Kina to protect Chris. She replies to leave it to her, uses her ability, and thinks she needs to reduce the impact of his fall. Wu calls for Sanchez, and he replies that he knows. Cell attacks again with his sword, and Sanchez manages to block it, saying he endured it. Hin says he did well and thinks he saw an opening before the second slash, but it's too obvious, and his instincts are telling him not to go for it. He wonders if Cell is tricking them, if maybe he has an AI or something like that, and says the next attack will come soon, so they should get back into position. Chris, struggling, summons his barrier again. The protagonist notices he's at his limit and his arms are beginning to crack. A single attack caused all of this. That's not good, and he tells them to hang in there just a bit longer. The Sword Saint attacks once more. Nam thinks it's happening again. Chris is thrown back and Sanchez blocks it, wondering if he's gotten stronger, and asks what Wu is waiting for, saying at this rate they'll die. Wu says they just need to hold on a bit more. Sanchez calls him a crazy bastard. Hin thinks they're the only team that blocked the second strike, and wonders if Cell will do the same thing again. Cell stares at them with his massive sword. The protagonist watches him. Kina calls his name. Nam asks if he's okay. Chris is lying on the ground, trembling and in bad shape. The team leader says he knows it's hard but asks him to trust himself just one more time. Sanchez asks what he's doing and says Cell is about to attack again. Chris asks if he has a plan. Wu says yes, and he'll definitely drive a sword through his throat. His teammates look at him in shock. Ninai gets into attack position and Sanchez says he's coming. Hin says they'll have to hold the line without Chris's barrier this time. Sanchez gets angry. The Sword Saint attacks again. Sanchez fails to block it and is sent flying. The protagonist uses his position transfer skill number 2, faces his opponent, and his opponent's sword disappears. He stares him down and points his dagger, thinking it's time for Cell to be finished, and charges at him. The instructor and Reen watch in shock until Nam is struck in the stomach by a blow from Ninai. Blood splatters on the ground. Wu thinks the guy's a bastard and that he has to try one more time. Hin uses his Dark Dash skill, releasing a huge energy, and thinking that if it weren't for Chris's barrier, his organs would have exploded. The position transfer failed, but at least he trapped him. A space dark as pitch, without a single trace of light. Not even he can see anything in there. But in the darkness's lair, his fangs are stronger than any weapon. He'll defeat him with everything he's got. The Sword Saint senses him, quickly turns, and rushes with a clenched fist. The protagonist thinks this guy is a complete monster. He moves his hand, uses his red eye, moves his dagger without touching it, sending it to the opponent's back, and says that this time it's Cell who got baited. Several daggers are summoned. Nam uses the Fang of Darkness, Black Blade Rain, and hits him multiple times. Those outside only see the massive black mist. Chris, curious, asks what's going on in there. Ares says it looks like it's almost over. The mist weakens, and Wu stands unharmed, while the Sword Saint lies on the ground. Everyone stares, speechless. Hin thinks that this silence, and he did it. Balton says that was fun. The protagonist team approaches, excited. Chris says it was incredible and asks how he did it. Nam replies it was thanks to everyone working together. He asks about Sanchez. Kina says he's a bit in shock, but the instructors are helping him recover. Wu says he understands and that's a relief and calls them over to finish it. Chris asks what he means by finish it, and Kina says, didn't it already end? Hin raises his sword. The Sword Saint's body trembles, and Chris, frightened, asks what he's doing. The protagonist asks if they don't need to make sure he's really eliminated. The instructor just stares at him without saying anything. Prone smiles and says, for a half-breed, he's not bad. The boy next to him says, even so, compared to her, he's nothing special. The heir of lust responds that of course not. He was born inferior. His true nature will show, no matter what. And he's so stupid and vulgar. Then she looks to the side and notices Reen, radiating a terrifying aura, and wonders who that girl is. And if those horns are a bear's and why she's staring at her, because it's so terrifying. Until he hears demons commenting that, as expected from the heirs of the sins, they're already in an intimidation match, and one asks who they think will win. The twin boys respond that obviously Prone will win, and that the other girl wouldn't even make a decent snack. The heir of lust thinks that maybe she isn't that weak after all. Then the protagonist looks back, a little confused, and wonders if that isn't Reen, and why she's radiating a bloodlust aura. Then someone calls him. It's the instructor. Nam asks what it is. Ares asks if he's seriously asking that because he doesn't know. Wu answers that yes, he is. The instructor walks away and says he'll keep an eye on him from now on. Hin doesn't understand and thinks he expected praise or something, and now he'll have to keep an eye on Reen instead. The two girls keep staring each other down, mana swirling around them. The protagonist approaches and asks if they're still going at it. He wonders about the girl on the other side. Who is she? He thinks she has blue eyes, long hair, oni horns sticking out of her head. She's from the House of Lust, Laurel Prone. He wonders why she's trying to fight with his partner. He paid so much attention to the human world story that he knows nothing about the demon world. The heir of lust notices something. She stares at him and calls him a half-breed. Nam doesn't get it and wonders why she suddenly started talking to him. Prone tells him to become her slave. Reen, with fury in her eyes, rushes toward her to attack. The heir of lust asks if she's gone crazy. Ares tells them to stop. Unnecessary duels are forbidden in Satan, and they should settle personal problems outside. Wu thinks it's good the instructor stopped it. At least nothing bad happened to the 7 deadly sins after the entrance ceremony. Reen puts away her sword and walks off, and Prone, trembling, thinks she's definitely crazy. Hin asks if she's okay and says her group is next, so she should. The girl tilts her head, pulls out a handkerchief, wipes the sweat from his face, and says, "He did a good job." The heir of lust asks what kind of relationship the two of them have, and if she's dating a half-breed. The protagonist thinks he's being treated a lot better now that he passed, and thanks her. Reen asks if he held back his strength to look weak. The instructor tells Group 34 to step forward. The girl says she has to go, but won't tell anyone. Nam thinks he used all his strength to pass and wonders if he really looks that weak, and guesses she still thinks he's a priest from her family. A voice tells him to say his name. Wu asks if it's him. Prone replies that yes, and he says his name is Adele. The heir of lust says it's not a bad name. Hin asks why she called him. Prone asks why he's asking and thinks he interrupted her earlier. She releases a great burst of energy and tells him to ditch that bears and serve her, and to now witness her undeniable charm. She plans to steal him and make that B** ditch lower her nose. The protagonist says sorry, but it's his lady's turn now. Maybe next time. The heir of lust is outraged and asks if her charm isn't working. Nam walks away and wonders if he'll finally get to see Reen's full power. Prone screams behind him, asking if he's ignoring her. Wu watches his partner and wonders how strong she really is. He also has high expectations for the children of the other sins. A huge energy is released, and Hin thinks she has incredible composure. She's more amazing than he thought. Someone steps forward. It's Reen, in an attack stance with a powerful aura around her, Diana observes. Baltan laughs and says she's fun too. The protagonist wonders if she's walking straight toward the opponent, and what she's thinking. Reen gets closer and closer, stares him down. The two stand face to face with their swords. As she stares at him, she grits her teeth and attacks, defeating him and breaking his sword with just one strike. Everyone watches in shock. Reen walks away. The crowd cheers for her victory. The instructor smiles and says it wasn't bad at all. Nam says no way and asks if he saw that right. Did she really win that easily? And he thinks that's why Cell didn't attack her as she approached. He had already sensed her power level. Prone approaches and says it's a shame. She didn't even get to see her being humiliated by the Sword Saint. But she has to at least have that level of strength if she wants to be on the same level as her. Hin asks if she's saying that all the children of the deadly sins together could defeat the real Sword Saint. The heir of lust says that no one can defeat him at the moment. Maybe if the former Demon King were still alive. The protagonist asks if the heirs have abilities that surpass 10% of the Sword Saint's power. Prone interrupts and asks if he's joking, because anyone with eyes can see that pathetic fake is far weaker than 10% of the real Sword Saint's power. Nam thinks he struggled against a fake that doesn't even compare to the original 10%, and while he may be the creator of this world, he knows nothing about the demon realm. But this anticipation is making his heart race, and he'll see how things unfold. Ares calls the next group, Group 35, and only the deadly sins remain. Maybe it's due to the impact of Reen's performance, but the other heirs also defeated the Sword Saint. Baltan laughs and says it was easy. It was so one-sided that it was hard to notice the power difference between the Sin heirs, but he knows who the two strongest are, so he's not worried. The instructor says this includes the admission exams and tells everyone to gather in front of the podium. They're going to announce the results of the second test. Everyone who participated in combat passed, regardless of whether they won or not. As for the others, Wu thinks, as expected, those who gave up failed. Ares says good job to those who passed. With this, they are now official members of Saitan, as well as trainees. But they shouldn't get too excited. A hellish path lies ahead, and it will be so difficult they'll want to quit. And those who passed must gather for the entrance ceremony in 2 days. As for the 8 who defeated the Sword Saint, they are to remain where they are. Reen asks why he wants them to stay. Hin wonders if maybe he wants to reward them with access to the armory he mentioned in the first test. Ares says they passed with excellent results, and as promised, they'll get the chance to enter the armory. Baltan says he has a question. The instructor tells him to go ahead. The heir of envy asks if they can leave with multiple weapons, since Saitan's weapons seem very useful. The protagonist thinks that's typical of Envy's son. His greed and curiosity have no bounds, and he even got decent screen time in the novel. The instructor replies no, it'll be hard to focus if they use multiple weapons, so only one is allowed. And since time is short, he won't answer any more questions. Now, follow him, he'll lead them to the armory. Ares places his hand on the door, releasing a magic circle where he touched it, and a great energy is unleashed. The instructor says this is Saitan's gift to them, and whether it turns out to be their worst or best choice, that's up to them. Nam wonders if this is really an armory, because it looks more like the entrance to some dungeon. Ares says they can enter one by one in reverse order from the second test, and just to be clear, they'll all be inspected on the way out. Wu realizes he's last and thinks Aries is just doing whatever he wants. Balton gets excited that he's first and says he'll take the best one. The instructor tells him to shut up and get in already. Reen says she'll get an artifact since she already has a weapon, and asks what about him. Hin replies that he thinks he'll also pick an artifact, and wonders, does that mean everyone will do the same? Will anything good even be left when it's his turn? Aries says whoever's next can go in. The heir of envy comes out with an artifact and asks if it isn't cool. The protagonist thinks, as expected, everyone is leaving with artifacts, and wonders if he should pick armor. Reen says it's his turn. Nam sees she picked a bracelet and asks if he can ask what it does. The girl replies that he'll find out when he enters. The descriptions are inside. Wu asks about descriptions. Reen says yes, but some items don't have descriptions. Hin replies he understands, and wonders if some items really have no descriptions. Does that mean they're useless? He doesn't think so, since they're treating them so carefully. He's sure there's something special about them. Aries says he's the last one. The instructor stares at him and says if he has anything to say, spit it out already, and thinks his face says otherwise. The protagonist asks if he can ask what it means when an item has no description. Aries replies that it means they still have to discover exactly what it does. Nam says so they haven't figured out what it does or what kind of ability it has. The instructor answers precisely, and if he's lucky, he might end up with an item that has impressive abilities. But if he's unlucky, he could be cursed for the rest of his life, and there's not much time, so he marches inside. Wu thinks everything will depend on whether something good is left or not. He opens the door and steps in, saying it's really clean and well lit inside, and hopes nothing jumps out of the shadows to scare him. Hin notices a strong light and says it must be over there. He enters a room, looks around, and is really impressed, saying this is insane. That spear looks really unique, so he goes to check the description. It's the Twin Fang Spear, a spear used by a nameless demon to hunt serpents. The vengeful spirits of the slain serpents reside inside. When infused with a certain amount of mana, the forms of two serpents emerge. The protagonist says the description makes it sound very important, but the abilities aren't that great, and he already has his daggers, so he doesn't need it. Next is the Star Crystal, an orb infused with starlight once used by a skilled astrologer. When a small amount of mana is injected, it allows the user to borrow starlight to illuminate the surroundings. He says it doesn't really suit him since he uses dark element. It could work as a torch, but he'll pass. Then he notices an empty space beside it and wonders about the item that was there. It was the Great Diadem of Victor. Grants the wearer exceptional stamina and recovery abilities until the user's death. Wu thinks the item belongs to the user until death. And that's the one that was on Balton's head, that greedy bastard. He took a bound item and didn't expect to find one like that here. But that means most of the good artifacts are already taken. The Python's disguise isn't there either, nor is the Mage General's banner or the Fallen Noble's insignia. Hin gets frustrated that there's nothing left. The Deadly Sins took most of the good stuff. He wonders what to do. Most of the weapons and armor aren't that great. He looks to the side and sees a sword. He thinks he has no choice, but it's a cursed artifact. He could still use it. He grabs a sheet and pen and says he has to save as much as possible, but he'll spend now. He asks for info about the broken sword with no description in the armory. The response is that he must pay for the information, either with a relic rank artifact or 100 gold coins. Then the protagonist notices something nearby and writes to ask about the damaged scroll with no description next to the sword, but he also needs to pay for that info, at least 50 gold coins. Nam says 50 gold, huh? And gets it. Since it gives the price, he just needs to pick the most expensive item. He thinks there are a total of 7 no description boxes in this section, so he'll ask about their order. He asks for info about the black eagle-shaped stone, and the answer requires at least 1 gold coin. Wu says it was only 1 coin, and a voice says, exchange the owner's fortune with someone else's misfortune. Hin says so that's what it is, and moves on to the next one. The next answer requires 100 to 50 gold coins. Hin sighs and says none of them seem that good, and 2 are still left. The next answer is that it's at least a mythical rank artifact and costs at least 300 gold coins. The protagonist asks about mythical rank and says it's lucky. He wonders if it's better than the artifacts everyone else took and decides to take it. Then he feels something strange, looks to the side and wonders about the sensation like someone is watching him. There's a necklace nearby and 1 item is still missing. He wonders if this is also part of Adele's senses and asks for info about the unnamed necklace. Then Nam doesn't understand. A great energy starts to be emitted, and the answer is that he must offer a god. Wu wonders about offering a god. Could this be a legendary item? And he thinks he was screwed, but now surprisingly might be lucky. Then he gets confused, says it's too early to be happy. He wonders what god to offer, and right now, he doesn't even have one, and the demon god doesn't count. He wonders what this necklace even is. Maybe if he infuses a bit of mana into it. But nothing happens. Hin says it's frustrating. If he knew what it did, it only says to offer a god and nothing else. Maybe he can try something else. He writes to ask which god the unnamed necklace is related to. The answer is still, offer a god. The protagonist realizes it didn't work, and even if he rephrases the question, he'll probably get the same answer. He wonders if he should give up, but no, he's sure about this. He puts on the necklace and thinks this is far more valuable than any other artifact. His instincts are screaming that at him. Just to be sure, he checks one thing. He opens his status window, observes, and thinks just as he thought. Anyway, no one else will be interested in it, and he can take all the time he needs to figure it out. Aries asks about the necklace. Nam replies that it was an item without a description. The instructor asks if he chose it without knowing its function or identity, and says he must know something about it. Wu answers no. He doesn't know a single thing, and he thinks Aries is making that face again and wonders why he hates him so much. Aries says he'll believe him. After all, as an instructor at Saitan, he has to trust his cadets, and he tells them to take good care of the artifacts they chose. During hard times, they might even serve as an extra life. Hin thinks that everyone there, except himself, will probably become leaders of the demon world someday, and they'll receive tons of investment and support in the future. If he could just get a little of that, it would be great. He wonders if he'll really manage to stay in Saitan. Aries says they're dismissed, and that they'll see each other again at the entrance ceremony. The protagonist wonders if he should return to the dormitory. Reen answers yes. Someone taps his shoulder, calling him leader of Group 33. It's Balton, saying sorry and asking if he was too rude during their first meeting. He says it's a pleasure to meet him and introduces himself. He found the way Adele fought very impressive. Nam replies that it's a pleasure to meet him too, that he's Adele and thinks this came out of nowhere. But still, it's nice that Balton approached first. Then Wu notices something strange. The air of envy begins to squeeze his hand tightly. Hin, trembling, mentally calls him a bastard and wonders what he's doing out of nowhere. He thinks the Baltons are the kind who don't care about the weak, only interested in the strong, and are driven by envy and greed. He once pushed the protagonist of the human world to the brink, but when he saw his potential, he spared him and said they'd fight again. In short, this guy is a battle-obsessed lunatic. Still gripping his hand, the air of envy asks what's wrong, says he doesn't look too well. The protagonist replies it's nothing, and wonders if there's someone even stronger nearby and why he's come after him. Nam uses his position transfer 2 ability, teleports behind him, and says to cut it out, the test is over and they're all tired. In his thoughts, he begs for his hand back. Balton laughs and says he didn't even see that coming, that Adele is strong, and invites him to fight right now until one of them dies. Wu thinks he's crazy, a total psychopath, and says again like before that he has no intention of fighting. Reen yells at them to stop. If he wants to fight her guard, he'll have to fight her too. She draws her sword. The air of envy says he loves fighting, but taking on both of them at once would be too much, and he'd rather not get hurt before the academy starts. He's sure there'll be plenty of chances, so he'll see him next time. Hin thinks he said he didn't want to get hurt before classes start and wonders if he really wanted to fight him to the death. He's definitely missing a few screws. Now that he's seen him up close, he really can't read this madman. Balton grabs his sword and asks when Adele threw his blade over there. Reen says they should get going. The protagonist agrees. He thinks it's only been one day, but it feels like so much more, and he's starting to feel excited about life at Saitan. In the dormitory, Nam smiles. He says maybe it's because of yesterday, but he feels so relaxed today. His body also feels better. He's definitely growing. He goes to see if the Satan uniform they sent fits. They knew where he was staying and delivered it straight there. They're really thoughtful. He puts on the uniform and says it's more comfortable than he expected. They said only uniforms are allowed for the next 3 years, but at least this one's practical. He gave the uniform to his partner and wonders how it looks on her. Maybe he should go take a peek. Wu knocks on her door. She asks who it is. Hin replies that it's Adele, just wanted to know if she needed anything before he heads out. Reen says to come in. The protagonist enters and sees her. Then says she looks beautiful. The girl gets very flustered and asks where he's going. Nam notices even her ears turned red. He wonders if she's embarrassed and thinks that surprisingly she has a cute side. He says it's a rare day off, so he was thinking of walking around the city, and that she should take some time to relax too. He's heading out now. Reen says wait and asks if he has anything to do. Wu doesn't get it and asks if there's something he's supposed to do. He wonders if he forgot to say something. She says, as your guard. Hin realizes, right, he's supposed to protect her. He got too excited thinking about relaxing alone and forgot. The girl says she's going with him and to wait while she changes clothes. And she asks how long he plans to keep staring at her. The protagonist says, of course, he'll wait outside. He steps out thinking it's his day off. Later they head out and the streets are busy. Nam thinks the city is lively and clean. It's hard to believe a war took place here 10 years ago. Even though reconstruction is still happening in other regions, it looks like the humans won the war but failed to fully take the capital. Reen calls him and says she wants to eat that. Wu asks if she's talking about street food. She says yes. Ahead, skewers are being grilled. Hin approaches and asks what kind of skewers they are. The vendor replies they're vegetable and seasoned venison skewers. The protagonist thinks he hopes it tastes like chicken skewers and asks for two. The vendor says right away. Reen eats her skewer. Nam eats his too and says it's delicious, then asks if she liked it. She replies it's delicious. Wu thinks that seeing someone as stoic as her make that kind of expression, maybe she's starting to open up, little by little. Afterward, they continue walking through the city while talking. Hin thinks it's been a long time since he truly had a day off, and this is probably the last time he'll relax for a while. Until he notices a statue. He wonders about the giant statue in the middle of the city. Who is it? He asks who the statue is of. Reen asks if he seriously doesn't know and says it's of the first Demon King. The protagonist thinks about the first Demon King, and on second thought, she really does resemble Diana. There aren't many chances to see the first Demon King's face, so he walks closer to take a better look. Then, the statue's eyes begin to glow, emitting intense pressure. Nam doesn't understand. He realizes his necklace is glowing. A light is emitted, shooting directly at his necklace. One of the gems turns gray. Wu wonders what's happening. His partner asks what he's doing, why he suddenly took out his artifact and started staring at it. Hin, still confused, wonders if he's seeing things. But no, he's sure he saw light coming from the statue and the color of the necklace changed. He looks to the side and realizes he was the only one who saw it. Even Adele only gave vague responses, like, offer a god. But now he's discovered something significant in the most unexpected place. This necklace is definitely connected to the first Demon King, and if he investigates everything related to it, he'll find something. Reen says it's time to go back. The protagonist agrees, and thinks he's extremely curious about the true nature of this necklace. Elsewhere. The next morning, after the day off, the two head to Saitan. Nam says they should hurry, the entrance ceremony is about to start. The director and instructors are already seated in the auditorium where the ceremony will be held. Around 100 students have arrived. Wu thinks it's just a normal ceremony. Students comment they can't believe that little girl is the director, that she's the one who overwhelmed them with just her presence. And yet, she's cute. Hin hears it and thinks, cute my ass. She's covered in tattoos and has the body of a child. He wonders how they can call that cute. Maybe there's something wrong with their eyes. The director stares at him with cold, shadowy eyes. The protagonist trembles and thinks he meant to say she's adorable, then wonders if she can read minds too. Aries tells everyone to be quiet and says the entrance ceremony will now begin. With his shout, the ceremony starts. Somehow the director's speech is surprisingly ordinary and already nearing its end. The atmosphere begins to calm. A voice says they should be aware of Saitan's rules. It's the instructor. She says with that, the director's speech ends. And now they'll begin the oath of the top cadets. She asks for the first and second place cadets to come to the stage. Nam thinks that, as expected, those two chased those ranks. His partner seems worried, and the only reason she entered was to avenge her mother, so she's probably not interested in competition. As for himself, no matter what others say, he has to focus only on what he needs to do. Then he notices something. Someone is pointing at him. It's Balton. Wu wonders if it's that creepy guy again, if he's some kind of stalker. He tells himself not to react. Stay calm, don't get dragged into it. A voice calls for the top cadet to step forward. Diana steps forward. Hin thinks it was expected from someone said to be blessed by the devil himself, the Demon King's daughter, and wonders, now that she's claimed the top cadet title, who could possibly stand in her way. They say they solemnly swear. They've been accepted into Saitan. They've eliminated all disgrace and promised to rebuild the demon realm. The protagonist thinks that, as the oath echoed, the atmosphere inside the auditorium began to shift. It was possible to feel the anger of those who lost their homes and families to the humans, and if anyone finds out he's of the arson lineage, just thinking about it gives him chills. In the worst-case scenario, he'll be tortured for eternity. Later, still in the same place, a voice announces that this concludes the entrance ceremony of Saitan. Aries tells the cadets to check the bulletin boards behind them to see which classes they were assigned to. After confirming, they need to proceed to their designated rooms. Nam calls for the young lady so they can go. The students check their classes. Wu realizes he's in Class A and wonders about his partner. He smiles and says, damn, because she's in Class C, and honestly, he didn't want them to be separated. Reen tells him to wipe that smile off his face. He's still her guard and better show up when she calls. He says of course but thinks, nope, and that it's perfect. Looks like he'll finally get some rest. As he walks, he accidentally bumps into someone. The boy glares at him and asks if he's looking to die, calling him a damned son of Cerberus. Hin thinks that guy is from the Gluttony family, Varys' son Samuel. and remembers clearly. He's strong even among the 7 sins, and he's picking a fight even though he's the one who bumped into him. It's ridiculous, but he has to avoid trouble on a day like this. The protagonist says he wasn't paying attention and apologizes. Samuel walks away saying to get out of his life and that he's lucky it's the first day. Nam wonders why all the sin heirs are like this, and is sure Balton isn't in his class either. Somewhere else, someone slams a table and asks if they're doubting them. Aries says that's not the point. The instructor says she's now a legitimate Saitan instructor. The male instructor says that kid is very dangerous and speaks from experience. It would be better if he handled it himself. She replies that the student was already assigned to her, Class A, and he can't just cut the line. The director says that's enough and tells them to sit down. The instructor asks why it's always her. Lu Jian asks why she wants to change class assignments. The instructor says he'd prefer to personally take care of Cadet Adele. He's faced countless enemies like that child on the battlefield and says that boy was born an eliminator and could turn his blade on allies at any time, so he must be restrained now. The glasses-wearing instructor asks if he's not being overly cautious about that half-breed. The one next to him agrees, saying Adele is also significantly weaker than the other Sin heirs. Ares replies, no, strength isn't defined by power alone. His ability to try bold things and remain calm isn't inferior to the others. The instructors glance at each other in silence. Ares says that's why he wants to take care of Class A. The instructor cuts in and says, wait, so he just doesn't trust her. Ares apologizes if he made her feel bad. She asks when he'll stop treating her like a child. The director, now irritated and surrounded by mana, says, that's enough. Everyone goes silent. Lu Jian says he understands their concerns, but the classes have already been assigned, and changing them now wouldn't bring anything good. Ares says he understands. The director says it's fine to be cautious, and tells the instructor to pay more attention to this child named Adele. She says understood. Lu Jian says they can now conclude the meeting and tells the instructors to head to class and welcome the students. Inside the classroom, the protagonist wonders why he's so unlucky. Maybe it's punishment for not following Diana or even Balton. Prone asks if he followed her all the way there. Nam replies that class assignment was random. The heir of lust says that's wonderful. She'll grant him the privilege of being her slave there too. Wu thinks, here we go again. Samuel calls out to the two of them and says if they don't shut up, he'll eliminate them. Prone looks furious and tells him to repeat that, calling him a brat and saying she'll eliminate him. Hin wonders if he's going to survive this. Then the door opens. The instructor walks in and says they're noisy, asks if they're already fighting on the first day. The protagonist looks at her. Idea says welcome everyone. She's the instructor in charge of Class A, and to remember her name. She introduces herself as their senior and people call her the Legion of Calamity. Nam wonders about the Legion of Calamity. Then he hears a student asking if that's the famous Legion of Calamity who eliminated 10,000 humans alone at the Rolex River. His partner asks if it wasn't 30,000. Wu thinks someone that strong being his instructor increases his chances of surviving. The instructor says that concludes her introduction and now she'll explain how the class segment will work. And she says she'll teach the hunting method. They won't be hunting animals or demonic beasts. A student asks what they'll be hunting. Idea replies that they'll be hunting one of the reasons he came here, humans. Hin thinks about humans and realizes that's how things are going to be. The instructor says she'll only teach hunting methods. Magic and weapon combat will be taught by other instructors. Prone thinks she has a pretty face for an instructor. Idea says she's also responsible for basic stamina training. The protagonist says that's his weak point. The instructor tells them to head to the training grounds to begin the first lesson. They move to another area and Nam thinks it's huge, maybe 4 or 5 times the size of a normal field, and wonders if it's for weapons and magic. Idea asks if everyone is there and tells them to focus and keep the students inside the space. She releases energy which grows larger and forms a portal. Someone begins to emerge from it, soldiers with their weapons. Everyone looks surprised and confused. The instructor says they aren't real humans, just illusions created by her magic, and she's also the one who created the Sword Saint for the admission test. Wu thinks a clone with about 10% of the Sword Saint's power. She's a monster. Satan is formidable, but the Imperial Academy far surpasses it. It's terrifying. Idea says the task is simple. Get past the humans and reach her. She asks who wants to go first. She looks to the side and says he called himself Adele, so why not try stabbing her in the throat like he did with the Sword Saint? Hin thinks it was Ares before, and now she's got her eyes on him too. He wonders if he's going to fight her directly. The instructor says that there's a leader among the humans, their source of mental strength, and when their leader falls, humans collapse like dominoes. If the leader is strong, so are they, so she'll act as their leader. The protagonist draws his dagger and says he understands, thinking about Sun Tzu's art of war, that defeating the enemy means capturing their general. Subduing the leader among all those soldiers will be too easy. Idea says it's impossible for him to subdue her, so she'll consider it a pass if he lays a hand or weapon on her and tells him to begin. Nam uses his transfer position ability and immediately appears behind her, placing the dagger at her neck, asking if this counts as a pass. He thinks dozens of meters separated them, but for him, that distance is nothing. Before, he could only go a few meters. This is great progress. With this, he could easily destroy an enemy base. The instructor smiles, brushes his dagger aside, and says, now she understands why they said to keep an eye on him. He passed and can return to his place. Wu replies that he understood and wonders if this is hostility or curiosity, because he doesn't know what part of himself made them act like this, and wonders if they figured out who he really is. Idea says they all saw Cadet Adele, and those who fail will receive extra lessons. After a while, still in the same place, the cadets attack the humans. Hin watches and thinks they've got the basics down, as expected of demons. These are normal humans with no powers, so it's no surprise. But they only manage to take down a few, and if the instructor starts controlling them directly, the humans point their spears at a cadet. The protagonist watches and thinks that's going to hurt. The cadet leaps, saying he'll jump over them. The summoned humans aim their bows and shoot. Nam smiles and thinks transfer position is way too broken. At this rate, he might aim to be the top of the class. Idea calls the next cadet. Someone walks up telling others to move. Wu wonders if that's Samuel's voice and wants to see if his personality matches his skills. Samuel says he's starting. Hin watches closely. The air of gluttony releases his energy. It grows more intense, creating a vortex and a heavy pressure. The protagonist sees him wipe them out in the blink of an eye and realizes this is magic. His gluttony ability is monstrous. It devours everything. He decides to leave first place to him, for now. The instructor grumbles, waves her hand, and asks what's with all this dust. Smoke swirls. Nam thinks as expected. There's no way an instructor would be taken down by a cadet. Idea says he destroyed everything except her, and it was impressive, enough to impress her for a moment. But unfortunately, he failed. Samuel doesn't understand. The instructor says the reason. She snaps her fingers and summons more humans, saying that if you don't eliminate the leader, humans will always find replacements to fill the gaps. No matter how many you kill, it's always the same. Wu thinks there are so many soldiers, at least 200 of them. Idea says his magic is powerful for a first-year cadet and calls the next one. Hin thinks Samuel looks frustrated but is handling the result surprisingly well. The air of gluttony walks past him, clearly pissed. The protagonist thinks the reason he failed was overconfidence in his own power. If he had just focused on eliminating the target like he did, he would have passed without any problem. Then someone laughs and says they've made them wait long enough. It's Prone, saying it's finally her turn. The cadets recognize her as Prone of the 7 deadly sins and wonder how she's going to pass. The air of lust calls the humans inferior troops and asks if they dare block her path, until she starts feeling something strange and breaks into a cold sweat. The cadets ask why she's not moving and if something happened. Prone wonders what to do. The protagonist thinks it's as expected. She, a daughter of lust, doesn't fight directly. She controls servants like a queen bee. Basically, she can't do anything alone. The air of lust thinks she needs to do something and continues sweating. She turns around, eyes full of tears, and tells her slave to help her. The cadets ask about the slave and if she just called someone a slave. Nam wonders what she's thinking, calling him that. Prone tells him to help her already. The instructor moves her hand. The air of lust is startled as the opponents approach and attack her. Wu wonders if she can't use buffs on herself and thinks maybe there's a special reason for that. Prone calls for help. Hin ignores her and notices something beside him. He sees healing magic being used on a boy. The boy thanks the girl and she says there's no need to thank her. She's just happy he wasn't seriously hurt, until the wound is completely healed. The protagonist, surprised, wonders if that was healing magic and thinks that's a power only humans can use, which means that Child is also a half-blood, and to think he ended up in the same class as someone with the rare talent to heal. He doesn't remember her name but knows he has to find a way to connect with her, and wonders if he should approach her now. Idea calls him and says Prone was asking for his help earlier, and now that the test is over, it'd be good if he could help her. Nam says he understands and is going, thinking she couldn't have asked at a worse time. He taps Prone's head and calls her useless, telling her to get up since it's over. The air of lust, trembling, sits and asks if he saw everything. Wu asks what she's talking about. Prone, irritated, tells him to stop playing dumb and calls him a slave, asking if he's messing with her. Hin says he saw her being weaker than a slave. The instructor claps and tells them to clean up and gather. She says she had some expectations, but the results were as expected. Still, good job on the first lesson. It's important to experience things like this to understand where they fit in, where they make mistakes, and what their limits are. Knowing these things helps them support each other and fight together flawlessly in battle. The protagonist thinks that in the Human Imperial Academy, students are divided based on skills, but here classes are random, so synergy is key. The instructor is probably trying to emphasize that. Idea says that as for the cadets who passed, Adele will be eagerly watching their progress. Nam thanks her and says he'll do his best to learn everything. The instructor tells them to return to the room for the next lesson. Wu wonders if she was praising him and why Samuel seems so hostile, thinking he's always looking for a fight. And she's always trying to make him her slave. He wonders if it's even possible to build his own faction in a place like this. Later, in another location, after the teacher's class, the rest of the lessons followed normally. The instructor says it's a pleasure to meet them, and that he's the teacher responsible for theoretical education. In theory class, they learned about the history of the demon realm and the weaknesses of humans. The professor says demons gathered around the first demon king and that their body structure is very similar to humans. Hin wonders if getting hit there hurts for demons. The instructor says that next time they'll have a quiz on today's content, and if they want to skip classes, they'd better memorize everything. They close their books. The protagonist puts his head on the book and asks if this is for real, saying it's just like when he went to school. It's the first day and he's already exhausted. He looks around and thinks he's got no friends now, just like before, until Nam realizes something. There's that girl. Maybe he can talk to her this time. He walks over, stands in front of her, and says it's a pleasure to meet her, introducing himself as Adele. Everyone looks in their direction, and Wu wonders why everyone is staring there. The girl says she means it's also a pleasure to meet him. Hin thinks that whenever two half-demons do anything, they're bound to draw attention. She seems uncomfortable and thinks it's best to leave the rest of the conversation for later. She says she'll talk to her again another time. The girl replies, "See you later." The protagonist walks toward the door, thinking he's going straight to the bathroom to drown his mana and sadness or something like that, until he runs into the air of gluttony. He thinks this is a terrible moment. Samuel asks if it's him again. Nam says he was just leaving and Samuel can go first. The air of gluttony says he's nauseating and calls him a low-class creature. Wu's mana spreads around his body. He says Samuel's family must be amazing. Samuel also releases mana around his body. Hin says they even managed to produce a talking piece of trash like him, asking if they aren't incredible. The air of gluttony calls him disgusting and inferior, and says he'll turn him into mincemeat. The protagonist smiles, thinking that unlike Baltan, this guy shows pure hatred and hostility, and if he gets in the way of his plans, it's better to eliminate him now. Wu stares at him and says that if they use magic, no one will care if an arm flies off. Then the instructor tells them to stop right now, and that class is about to start, so they should take their seats. The two stop immediately, and Hin wonders when he even got there. They fall silent and the energy around them fades. The protagonist thinks that even if he accepts that, the instructor appeared out of nowhere. Both their skills were neutralized. He wonders who this instructor really is. The teacher says he should introduce himself now and tells them to return to their seats. The two go back, Samuel irritated and Nam thinking he ended that too easily and it's disturbing. The instructor tells them to calm down and says his name is Robolt, and from now on, he'll be teaching them magic. Wu thinks that makes sense. He's the instructor in charge of the magic classes. If he's a teacher at Saitan, then he must be highly skilled. This is definitely promising. In any fantasy world, the first thing that comes to mind is magic. In his novel, magic wasn't categorized as a talent or trait. It was something entirely different. Maybe it's more like a skill. Depending on the perspective, it could even be considered a field of knowledge. Robolt says that to learn magic, there's something they absolutely need to understand first, and that is attributes. The main elements are earth, water, wind, and fire, the 4 basic elements. And by adding darkness and light, there are 6 basic attributes. Hin thinks about attributes, most people only have 1, but he himself has 2. The Bear's family definitely carries the darkness attribute, but he's unsure about the Arson family. The instructor says that's why in today's class they'll identify each cadet's mana attribute. He tells them to place their hands on the orbs. The color will change and reveal their attribute. Now, form a line. He calls them up one by one. The protagonist thinks he'll stay in the back and observe the others for now. Robolt tells them to place their hands there. The orb turns red. He says this cadet has the fire attribute. Green means the wind attribute. He calls the next cadet to place their hands on the orb, and it's the earth attribute. Now the next. Nam wonders if it's already his turn, thinking it came faster than expected. The instructor calls him forward and asks if he's Cadet Adele. Wu replies yes and wonders how he knows his name. Robolt tells him to place his hands on the orb. Hin puts his hands on it and the orb turns black. He wonders what that color means. The instructor says that's extremely rare. Half is black, and the other half is... The protagonist asks what the gray color represents. Robolt replies that black means the darkness attribute usually found in high-ranking demons, but gray is new even to him. He asks if Hin doesn't know either. The professor says he does. He's just supervising because it's so rare. And gray represents chaos, the magic attribute that defies the natural order. Nam asks if such an attribute really exists. Robolt apologizes and says unfortunately he doesn't know more than that. Wu says alright, thinking this is the first time he's heard of such an attribute and he doesn't think it appeared in his novel. Magic that defies the natural order, that phrase must be the key to figuring out what it is. For now, he'll focus on the darkness attribute since he's sure about that one. Later, still in the same place, Hin is thinking about the gray one, the magic that defies the natural order, until he notices Prone behind him. He asks what she's doing there. She gets startled and asks how he detected her stealth technique. The protagonist asks if that was a stealth technique. The heir of lust says, that's not the issue here, and asks what he's thinking. Nam asks what she means. Prone tells him not to play dumb. He provoked that guy. Wu replies that he simply can't stand him annoying him. The heir of lust asks if he really can't handle that. Hin asks if there's a problem with it. Prone asks if he didn't insult the guy's family. The protagonist says that outside forces can't enter Satan, so it doesn't matter. The heir of lust says that's not the point and asks if he really doesn't get it. Prone says it's not just about one demon against another. And that child's family is, she doesn't finish the sentence and says, whatever. She's going back to her corner and tells him to be careful from now on. Nam wonders what she was going to say. Was she trying to warn him because Samuel's family is known for brutal revenge? But he doesn't think that's the case. Either way, it's the last class of the day and it's better to focus. Now that he thinks about it, the instructor this time is, the teacher slams the table. It's Aries calling them weaklings, saying that if this were normal times, none of them would even deserve to be sitting there. Not to mention that with just a puppet using 5% of his power, all groups except the top 8 were eliminated. He asks if he's wrong. Wu thinks they're getting roasted on the very first class and wonders if he's provoking them on purpose. The instructor says that's why, from now on, he'll be teaching them swordsmanship, so that even if they lose their lives, they'll at least be guaranteed to take the opponent's arm with them. And to do that, later, in another location, he makes the cadets run. He says the foundation of swordsmanship is physical strength. A technique backed by stamina becomes 2 to 3 times more powerful. The cadets are exhausted, saying they're going to die and asking how much longer they have to run, and if they're not on the 30th lap already. Aries calls out to Prone and Samuel and asks who told them to use mana to run. They apologize. The instructor says they'll start all over again. Hin thinks those spoiled brats are always trying to use tricks. In his time, they had to fight knights right after possessing a body and escaping to the demon realm. Good times, true chaos. Aries says for everyone to stop, that they all did well today. The cadets who completed the 50 laps can go to the dorms. Those who didn't finish in time will have extra classes. The protagonist feels relieved and thinks today was no joke. He's heading to the dorm to sleep now. Later, he's walking. He's really exhausted and can't wait to enter and rest as soon as he gets to his room, wondering where the entrance to the boys' dorm is, until someone taps him on the shoulder. Nam quickly turns around and sees it's his partner. He wonders why she's there and asks if she was heading to the dorms. Reen replies yes. Wu asks how her first day of class went and wonders if anyone in her class offended her, thinking this is the perfect situation for misunderstandings. Reen replies that it wasn't enough, that there wasn't enough training, and asks him to do the final stretch of the day together. She asks if he'll help her. Hin thinks she never seems tired. The girl says there's a cadet training field nearby and there's still time, so they should go quickly. The protagonist agrees and thinks that even though it's tough, training with a child of the 7 sins will be beneficial. In another place, they arrive at the training ground and Nam says it's pretty spacious. He thinks there's a lot of workout equipment and everyone's working hard. This definitely helps improve physical strength. Reen calls him to start with this one. Wu asks if he can try first. The girl says it looks heavy. He replies not to worry and thinks he's been working out for years. This is nothing. Hin goes to lift the weight and starts trembling all over. Reen says he's too weak and tells him to stop before he gets hurt. The protagonist thinks that with Adele's body, which was confined indoors all his life, this is still too much. The young lady bends down and lifts the weight easily with no trouble at all. Nam says she's amazing and thinks that even in terms of raw strength, he can't compare to her and still has a lot of work to do. After some time, they're still training. Wu says it's been 2 hours and tells her it's time to go. Reen says she's fine by herself. Hin says he'll escort her to the dorms. He thinks that including today, he's trained quite a bit already and is curious about his current condition. While changing clothes, he decides to quickly check his performance. He looks at his stats in the system, and he realizes everything is still the same, but now his mana is at 1231. Even though he practices mana manipulation every night, it only increased by 24. Well, at the moment, he's in the slowest growth phase, Maybe it's better to get some elixirs. The young lady says she's finished changing and asks what he's doing. The protagonist replies it's nothing and calls her. At the dormitory, they arrive and Nam tells her to have a good rest. She tells him the same. Woo thinks he's about to pass out and needs to hurry to the dorm and rest. After some time, he goes up the stairs on the right and looks for the room assigned in his acceptance letter. It's room 407. The fourth floor is right there. He's curious to see who his roommate will be and hopes it's someone skilled and with good character. If needed, it would be good to make him an ally. It would be his first male friend in the demon realm. His heart beats a little faster. Hin opens the door and says it's a pleasure to meet him until he goes silent upon seeing Samuel. The two freeze. The air of gluttony glares at him, wondering what the hell he's doing there. The uncomfortable protagonist thinks this is just his luck. Of all people, he has to share a room with that guy. They stare at each other and Samuel calls him a filthy half-breed. Nam wonders if he should just kick him out. He sighs and gets up. The air of gluttony asks if he wants to fight. Woo asks if he's crazy and says they'll get in trouble if they fight here. He's just stepping out for a bit and hopes he has a good rest. Samuel calls him a smug bastard. Elsewhere, Hin walks outside and says that just when he thought he could finally relax, that jerk ended up being his roommate. He decides to walk around a bit and come back after Samuel's asleep. He wonders why a guy who isn't even a descendant of wrath is so consumed by anger, saying he doesn't get it. Come to think of it, Samuel is a descendant of gluttony. Maybe it's something similar to his own disposition toward chaos. Before hearing from instructor Robolt, he hadn't thought much about it and now wonders what exactly chaos means. Is it a type of mana attribute? Should he ask the scroll? No, if it knew, it would have explained what chaos is while teaching him how to use his powers through description. It doesn't make sense to spend money on that. It's frustrating not having the full information. For now, he needs to find a place to train his mana techniques. Then, the protagonist stops and wonders if that's a sparrow. No, but there are birds even in this place. That's kind of cute. He keeps staring at it, thinking there are some wild creatures roaming around Satan. That's interesting. Night falls back at the dormitory. Someone opens the door. It's Nam, noticing that Samuel is thankfully asleep. He lies on his bed, thinking he's so tired and is about to pass out. Still, he should train a little mana before sleeping, until he ends up dozing off. And someone watches him. It's the air of gluttony, thinking that even while asleep, he has that irritating dumb face. Besides that, he disgraced his house. Even if he was in the wrong, he won't be the first to apologize. There's so much to do, and yet he has to worry about someone pathetic like him. But the energy he showed during class, when he saw that, his heart ached painfully. It was a kind of pain he was sure he had felt before and wonders why that is. Then his whole body starts trembling, non-stop. Samuel wonders if gluttony is going out of control again and thinks he's feeling an uncontrollable hunger. This hunger makes it feel like his organs are cracking. It's unbearable. He looks at Woo and says that to make it worse, he has to stare at this smiley guy until morning and really wants to punch him. The next day, Hin wakes up and asks what time it is, if it's already morning. He notices something and looks out the window, spotting the bird from yesterday, and asks if that was the first thing it did today. He can't believe they let a creature like that in, especially in a place sensitive to outside invasions. Someone must be keeping an eye on him and wonders if Instructor Ares is the most cautious of them. After scanning its mana, he confirmed it's not an illusion. It's definitely a living being. Maybe he can tame them with food. The protagonist tries to call the bird, then looks to the side and notices Samuel is no longer there. Probably already went to eat and he needs to hurry or breakfast will be over. He wonders where the cafeteria is again. Somewhere else, inside the classroom, the instructor enters. Nam, seated, thinks he ended up missing breakfast while walking around and now he's worried and feels like he won't be able to focus in class today. Idea says she has an important announcement and asks if everyone is present. Woo gets curious and wonders what the important announcement is. The instructor says that today, during class, they will choose the class representative. Hin wonders if it's that sudden. A cadet asks how the representative will be chosen. Idea replies that she was planning to hold a vote but changed her mind and will pick one. And it will be. Prone gets anxious. Her mana flares up and she stands, saying the instructor made a great decision. The protagonist thinks that just like in the novel, the instructor chooses the heir of lust. Samuel's personality makes it hard for him to be a leader. Prone says that now, together with herself, they'll lead the class to the top and everyone must treat her like their queen. Nam thinks she's probably the best choice right now. She's not the smartest, but she has charisma and the best support skills. People start talking about Adele, saying he seemed competent, a half-breed as class rep, and that Samuel is kind of scary. Woo wonders if his performance in the first class was really that good and thinks he's still flattered they even considered his name. And it seems like she's already the class rep. The heir of lust tells her not to be shy, to go up and announce it. Idea says the class representative is not her. Prone gets irritated hearing this. The instructor says the class representative is Adele Pixie. Woo wonders if it's him, and a voice says, "This is absurd." Hin wonders if she's really choosing a half-demon as class rep, and what is she thinking? The instructor says she expects him to lead the class well. He replies that it's fine. Idea says she has another class to teach, so she'll just make the day's announcements and leave, and that they should prepare for the end-of-semester exams. The classes will focus on practical training. The practicals will be done in teams of 3, so they need to form their groups by the end of the day. The protagonist thinks, semester exams and practicals. Practical training in Saitan probably means eliminating humans, because in combat, elimination is essential. The instructor says that concludes today's topic and calls for Prone, and tells her that if she casually talks to her like that again, she'll get some private lessons. Nam thinks she's deliberately keeping the air of lust in check. Idea adds that besides that, she calls him class rep, and he needs to submit the team list by the end of the day. And everyone should do their best in today's classes. Wu thinks that, aside from the list, he wonders if there's a training area, or if it'll be like yesterday using dummies to get the idea. Then thinks no. If that were the case, there'd be no need to form teams. In the novel's timeline, it's not yet time for the human world terrorist incident. Anyway, what matters now is getting a good team. And he's basically already decided. People walk through the corridor, they glance sideways, startled, seeing Ares passing by with a scowl. Idea is sitting, sorting some papers. The professor opens the door and calls her. The instructor says he's here. He asks what she's thinking. Idea says it's been a while since she saw that scowl of his. And in a way, it's even nice. Ares says this isn't the time for jokes and asks why she chose him as class rep. The instructor replies that it was this morning and he surely has eyes and ears all over Saitan. The professor asks about giving that position of representative, and if she doesn't know what that means. Idea stands and says, of course she knows. And it's temporary, but she's giving him authority over the class. Ares says if she knows that, then she's seriously crazy. It's not too late. Change the representative immediately. If she doesn't, he glares at her furiously. The instructor says she won't. The professor says it's driving him insane. Idea says she likes that boy. His skills are amazing. And he's not arrogant like the descendants of the 7 sins. And since he has the backing of the Beres family, his identity is guaranteed. Ares says that's not enough reason to trust him. Nothing is more dangerous than a dull blade. The instructor grumbles and walks off, saying she'll handle everything herself and for him to stay out of it. And she's confident in her eye for spotting talent. The professor calls after her and grumbles when she doesn't reply. He thinks he should have been the one to handle that class. No matter what it took, he should never have let someone so dangerous be left to her. Most importantly, a half-demon once left him with an unforgettable scar in a past battle. For some reason, the feeling he gets from this one is disturbingly similar to Adele's. The odds of a blood relation are low, but he can't ignore it. It's far too unsettling. And they still don't exactly know what he wants. The professor whistles and the bird approaches. Ares, with the bird on his finger, says that so far he hasn't done anything suspicious, and to keep watching him. He thinks he can't take his eyes off him for even a moment. Somewhere else, the cadets are talking, and the protagonist notices that everyone is busy forming teams during the break. He thinks that even though he's the class representative, not a single person has spoken to him, and wonders if he looks suspicious or something, until he hears someone asking if he wants to team up. It's a boy asking Samuel, and he replies that he really doesn't care, as long as the guy doesn't hold him back. The boy thanks him and says, "You're my guy." Nam thinks that even someone like him got a teammate and wonders why no one's coming to talk to him. He thinks he has no choice but to approach someone on his own. He looks at someone's slightly nervous hand and thinks that, as expected, no one wants to talk to a half-breed like him. He needs to form a team before classes end, and he'll find someone. Wu notices the girl from before and calls out to her. The girl senses a scary aura around him and gets startled. Hin doesn't understand and thinks he was focusing on her mana, and that must have scared her. She has a decent amount of mana, and her healing abilities are good. She's the perfect teammate. He says they met earlier, his name is Adele, and he wanted to know if she's already found a team. The girl replies no. The protagonist says that's great and asks her name. The girl replies her name is Luna. Nam says it's a lovely name and asks what she thinks about joining his team, saying it would be a great help since he's the class rep. Luna says that it's a bit. Wu cuts her off, getting very close, and says there's not much time left before classes end, and since they're both half-demons, they'll probably work better together. The girl starts trembling and says it's fine. She'll do it and join his team. Hin says that's an excellent choice. Prone walks up and asks what's excellent, and says it looks like the two still don't have a group. The protagonist wonders when she showed up. The heir of lust calls out to them and says she'll let the two be under her command. Nam says they just formed a group so she can leave now. Prone says don't be ridiculous. She heard everything from over there. Luna wonders why the two are doing this here. The heir of lust says she still can't recognize his authority as class rep, and she is the true leader of this class. Wu wonders if he should have just refused, but since she showed no signs of backing down, he decided to include her. Prone asks why he's not responding. Hin thinks he added a few conditions. She has to consult him before making any decisions as team leader. Still, she's a descendant of the deadly sins, and it's better to keep her close. It was a plan to dent her pride while using her to a certain extent. The class heir says just trust her and follow her orders as the team leader. A week later, the protagonist is looking at his system stats and says he needs an elixir or something like that. Mana is a problem, but he still doesn't understand the chaos attribute. Maybe he'll get some clues in this week's magic class. Then he looks down at the creature and says that besides all this, the Creteworm's venom is becoming unstable, so he'll probably have to keep it with him at all times now. There's so much to worry about. At least Samuel is quiet, and that's a relief. And things are slowly getting better. The next day inside the classroom, the instructor greets them with a cheerful, "Good morning." Nam notices she looks excited and wonders if something good happened. Idea says today's class will be a bit special. They're going on a field training session. Wu thinks, finally, the first field class. He wonders if it'll be outside the academy. The instructor says they'll be leaving Saitan and heading out. The place they're going to is Oregon. Hin looks surprised and thinks that's the prison where humans who failed to return during the Demon-Human War were imprisoned. So they're taking them to a POW camp. Idea says they'll take a dimensional train and tells everyone to follow her. The cadets get up and say they're excited to see what kind of place it is, and ask if they're seriously going outside, even though it's not vacation yet. The protagonist thinks everyone is excited to leave the academy, but if they knew what kind of place Oregon really is, they'd be shocked. But there's something more important than the training itself. Soon, the main characters will discover a special opportunity there, and if he goes now, he might be able to get it before them. He wonders if he'll be able to find it while avoiding all the eyes around him and thinks the guards probably won't be weak either. Prone approaches and asks why he's so tense. Nam replies that he's probably just nervous since it's the first field class. The heir of lust asks if he really gets nervous. With that gloomy look, she didn't think it was possible. She tells him to relax. He has her, the team leader. So just follow her and everything will be fine. Wu wonders if she ever gets tired and thinks he'll see if she's still that energetic once they arrive at Oregon. Still, thanks to her, he calmed down a bit. This is a rare opportunity. He'll seize it no matter what. The train stops and a voice says they've arrived at the final destination, Oregon, and to disembark safely. They get off. The instructor says they've arrived and tells them to stay close to her. Hin looks around and thinks this is the Oregon POW camp. The atmosphere is just as intense as he expected. The students comment that the place is scary and ask if they're really going to train here. Idea replies, yes, this is the designated training area and there won't be combat, so there's no need to worry. The protagonist thinks they're talking as if something awful won't happen. What a twisted sense of humor. The guards ask if they came from Saitan. The instructor says yes and hands over the verification. Nam thinks this guard must be stronger than an instructor. The pressure coming from him is no joke. The guard confirms the verification and tells them to follow. Idea tells them to come along. The cadets walk. An insect crawls across the ground. Voices beg for help, pleading to be let out. Prone, frightened, asks what kind of place this is. The cadets ask if they're not smelling something weird. One of them answers that it feels like something's going to jump on them at any moment. Wu thinks it looks like they're starting to react. Samuel, irritated, tells the cadets to stop dawdling in front of him and move already. Hin thinks he doesn't seem very concerned. He's a strange guy. Someone calls out to them. A light shines. The instructor says they've finally arrived at the real training grounds. The protagonist thinks this is Oregon's true face and wonders if it's hell. People are locked inside cages, showing signs of torture. Idea says that, as they can see, this is a prison that holds the humans who attacked the demon realm. All the humans here are brutal criminals who killed at least one demon, even pregnant women and children. Now, they must be curious about the purpose of this training. She releases her energy and brings a human in front of them, telling them to pay attention. The human trembles in fear. The instructor grabs his chin and tells him to swallow quietly like a good boy, and it'll be over soon. The human screams in pain. His head is struck and explodes, spraying plasma. Idea says they just need to eliminate one human, however they want, and asks if that's not simple enough. The cadets, horrified, start trembling. Nam thinks that even after witnessing such a cruel death, he feels nothing, probably because he's become one with Adele. And no matter what he has to do, his goal won't change. He'll survive until the end, fix this world's fate, and fulfill Adele's wish. The instructor asks if the class rep has anything to say. Wu draws his dagger, stands in front of a human, and asks if he has any last words. The human says he only regrets not killing more of them and calls them insects, saying humanity will wipe out every last demon. Hin attacks him immediately and smiles darkly, thinking that hearing that before killing him was strangely satisfying. He asks if that's good enough. Idea says it was perfect, and now the rest of the class, just like the representative, must enter the cells and begin training, and the half-demon cadets should stay outside for a moment. The protagonist calls out to them and wonders if it's only the hybrid cadets. It seems there are others in the class besides him and Lena, but she looks really unwell at the moment. The instructor says they'll have to eliminate designated prisoners. The humans are kneeling on the ground. Nam realizes these prisoners are also half-demons. Idea says they must prove something, that they are not like those traitors. A cadet trembles and attacks the human, asking if they know how much they've suffered because of them. He says they deserve to die, and to finish them quickly. Wu wonders if it's already begun. Voices scream for help, crying out not to do this. Samuel releases his terrifying aura and uses it to devour them, while Luna is clearly frightened, her eyes filled with tears. The heir of gluttony doesn't need to brutally eliminate them with magic. Maybe he just wants to tear the humans apart. Luna is still doing very badly. Hin notices she's completely broken, and if the instructor sees her like this, she's going to be in trouble. Someone calls the instructor, it's prone, asking if using her ability to eliminate them still counts as a pass. The instructor replies yes. The heir of lust says she understands. She uses her skill, releasing energy, and says that now the human is bound to her, to eliminate the one next to him. The affected human attacks his companion beside him. Prone stares coldly and asks if that's enough. Idea replies yes, and that she passed. What was lacking can be fixed with time. The protagonist watches her and thinks that while she doesn't seem to lack hatred toward humans, she's more sensitive than he expected. The instructor asks if there's only one left, and calls for Cadet Luna, telling her to prove to herself who she is. Nam thinks if she fails to complete this training, she will. Luna, still nervous, thinks she can't and pleads to be allowed to leave. She sits on the ground thinking it's pathetic. She came here to avenge her mother, who had a hellish life because of a man who didn't even deserve to be called a father. But she can't do anything. Wu approaches her and asks if she's okay, and tells her to wait a bit. He'll help with this test. Luna looks surprised. Hin draws his dagger and says, "Let's begin." He places the dagger in her hand and says it might be terrifying, but she has to do it. He helps calm her and ease the tension in her hand. And like this, she just needs to slowly move forward. The girl, still scared and trembling, moves her hand and opens her eyes, now calmer. The protagonist says she did very well. He thinks this could have gone really badly, and obviously that would happen to a half-demon who can't eliminate a human. Best case scenario, expulsion. She'd face something far worse. The instructor says she can't understand what he was thinking, doing something like that, and surely doesn't believe he'll get away with it. Nam replies no, but his partner will. And it was clearly said it's valid to use abilities to eliminate humans. His partner is the only one among them with healing abilities, and he simply recognizes the value of her talent. Idea says that's outrageous and asks if, by that logic, he would abandon cadets without talent. Wu answers, of course, if they don't have talent, they'll be left behind anyway. The instructor smiles and says he really is doing whatever he wants, and she'll remember those words. Then she goes to the other cadets and tells the two of them to wait there. Hin feels relieved and thinks that was close. And they were lucky his answer aligned with what she wanted. If it were Ares, there'd be no chance. He says it seems they got through it safely. Luna asks if he's serious, then says she understands, and that's a relief. The protagonist holds her and wonders if she fainted from nerves, and thinks that's good. He tells her to sleep well and wonders if now the real game can begin. He thinks the inner part of Oregon is right in front of him and he still has enough time. A light begins to shine. Nam sees a guard passing and thinks, as expected, security is tight. To find the miracle, he'll need to descend underground, and he'll try to fully cloak himself in darkness. He thinks it's great. He did it. This definitely proves he's improved, and with his body hidden in the shadows, he should be able to infiltrate easily. He just needs to reach the nearby underground entrance. Wu walks. The guard stops. Hin wonders if he's been discovered. The guard looks back, sees nothing, and continues walking. The protagonist feels relieved and thinks that being able to sense even the slightest difference, just what you'd expect from an Oregon guard. And he needs to hurry. He keeps walking until he realizes he found it. The only empty cell on the first floor, and there's a passage inside. Nam uses his position-shifting skill and moves, teleporting inside the cell. The pressure is intense in there. He thinks that even though he expected a pressure mechanism on the floor, he wonders how to reach the lowest level. He vaguely remembers how deep the descent was for the main character, so he'll try using that. While falling, Wu counts, and reaches 6. He thinks this is it. He throws his dagger and listens for the sound of it hitting the ground. He teleports again, landing on the floor. He looks around and spots an underground water channel. And next, come the toxic black slimes. The poison is lethal on contact. In that case, he'll aim at their cores from a distance. Hin uses Fang of Darkness, a rain of black blades, and defeats the slimes with his dagger. He thinks that eliminating these black slimes is easy when you know their weakness. And now he just has to go deeper into this slime. He enters the goo. A voice tells him not to go further, that a great evil has already been dealt with. The protagonist wonders about this great evil and thinks he never wrote about that. That place is where a demon who rebelled centuries ago is dormant. He wonders if the great evil being referred to could be the demon even the Demon King couldn't handle and had to seal. Well, he'll find out when he sees it. He exits the goo and asks if this is the place. There's a skeleton with its hands and feet bound. Nam says it's probably hidden inside that skeleton's heart, and he's finally going to obtain it. He reaches out his hand and notices something strange. The heart begins to beat intensely and glows bright red. Wu stares, confused, thinking this is absurd. Energy starts pouring from the skeleton's eye sockets and around its body, emitting a powerful light. Hin thinks he can't believe something this absurd is really happening. And that emblem, the same mark as the Arson family on his neck. So, in the end, the kingdom's traitor was connected to the Arson family. The skeleton tells him to listen carefully to his words. The protagonist says he's listening. The skeleton says that if he can hear his voice, then he surely can bear the same burden, that his blood carries chaos, and he must not be consumed by it. Chaos is a force that distorts the order of the world. If he becomes obsessed only with its meaning, he'll eventually lose himself just like the skeleton did. The skeleton's bones begin to crumble and the heart falls to the ground. Nam thinks that the heart now appears to be inactive. He picks it up and energy begins to release. Wu feels it, the constant hunger, the craving for destruction. The heart shatters into pieces. He says this must be the lingering desires of the Arson ancestor. Hin opens his status window and gets excited to see telekinesis. He finally got it. He says he'll test it a bit. His dagger drops to the ground. He says it's not a mana issue, maybe a lack of proficiency, and he'll need to train diligently. Still, he discovered clues about chaos affinity here. It's beyond raw power. It was unexpected, a huge gain he hadn't anticipated. And now there's nothing left to gain here. He'd better return before anyone notices his absence. Later, still in the same place, Prone asks what he was doing wandering around alone. The protagonist replies he was just taking a walk. The heir of lust asks if he really thinks he can just go for a walk in a place like this. Nam walks away, replying that the sight of the cells full of humans felt strangely dangerous. Prone asks where he thinks he's going in the middle of their conversation. Wu thinks, either way, he wonders about his partner who fainted. Luna approaches and Hin asks if she slept well. She replies yes. The protagonist says that's good. She slept so deeply that if someone had carried her away, she wouldn't even have noticed. His teammate thanks him for his help earlier and says that if it weren't for him, she would have. Nam cuts her off, saying it was nothing, so she doesn't need to worry about it. He thinks now she owes him one. He might be able to use that someday. The instructor tells them to gather. Fortunately, no one failed this exercise, and their expressions look much better now. Still need refinement, but they're getting there. Now they're heading back to Saitan. Wu thinks the short time spent there felt really long, but they're finally leaving that place behind in peace. In Saitan, inside the classroom, Hin thinks a week has passed since they returned, but nothing has really changed. The half-demon cadets seem to have overcome some kind of fear through the experience of killing humans, and he needs to train the telekinesis he acquired. He practices under the desk using pencils. Meanwhile, the instructors keep hinting about the upcoming semester exams. In the novel, Saitan's first years invade the Imperial School around the exam period, which means the semester tests will be an invasion of the human world. He wonders how many of them will survive. He notices his teammate staring at him, but she quickly looks away. The protagonist wonders what's wrong with her expression. Luna lays her head on her desk. Nam walks over to her and taps her, saying, "Good morning, flower of the day." The girl says he startled her. Wu says she wasn't responding, so he tried to give her a scare and noticed she doesn't look well and asks if something's wrong. Luna replies that nothing happened. Hin asks if she's sure and she replies yes, completely. The protagonist invites her to have lunch later. The girl asks, "Lunch?" Nam asks if she has other plans. She gets excited and replies no, and tells him they should eat together. Wu says he'll see her in front of the cafeteria at lunchtime. He thinks she's emotionally unstable but easy to read. She doesn't seem afraid of him anymore. It looks like he earned some points for what he did in Oregon. Later, they go outside. Hin is standing around and notices that lunchtime is almost over. He wonders where his partner went. He thinks it's weird to eat alone when he doesn't even eat lunch. And with nothing else to do, maybe he'll just go back to the dorm and train. Until he looks to the side, there she is, with Diana. He doesn't understand and thinks he needs to run. So the protagonist uses his teleport ability. Reen pauses, a bit confused, and the heir asks what happened. The young lady replies that she thought she saw her guard, but maybe it was just her imagination. Nam is hiding behind a bush and wonders why they are here, thinking that's the worst possible combination. Considering what he heard in Oregon, If they find out he's a descendant of the arson family now, he'll definitely lose his life. Not only did that family play a pivotal role in defeating the demon realm, but more importantly, they eliminated the Demon King. More precisely, they eliminated his wife. He needs to get out of there fast. Diana says she thinks she saw someone too. Reen says whatever, maybe he's just busy and they should keep going. Wu walks away relieved, saying that was close, and he needs to be more careful. Still, this isn't a bad place. He didn't know there was a spot like this behind the cafeteria. It's better than his stuffy room, and he wonders if he should start training there. Until he hears someone screaming. Hin runs and thinks that voice. It's his classmate. Luna is telling a boy not to do that, and she looks really scared. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.